Okay, so noting that it is, oops, hold on. It's May 19th, 2021. I'm going to call at 7:01 p.m. I'll call the Board of Health meeting to order. And we have several variance hearings and appointments, and then other business that we will be addressing this evening. But first, I'd like to announce or accept any items to be added as not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance of the meeting, and then we can vote to amend the agenda. So Lisa, you mentioned that you have something.
Yeah, I wanted to, so I see Farm Ponds on. I just want to make sure we talk about, any restrictions, if any, that are needed this summer. And also I would like to add signage for the tennis courts, and also Sherborn, giving guidance to the Sherborn Rec Department for programs.
Okay. Anyone else have anything else? All right, do we have a motion to amend the agenda as recommended?
So moved.
Second.
Daryl, aye.
Happy Evers, aye.
Lisa, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye, if you can hear me.
Yep. Matt Vitale, aye.
We can, Rebecca. You probably want to mute though, because we hear a lot of background too.
Yep, in a moment. We'll be able to.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, who's that?
Tom Curran.
Oh, yes, hi.
I was just
How
say
are
that's
you?
Tom.
Good, yep. Okay, so we have the food and camp inspector on the phone, and there are a few things to go over with him. So we can take those items first before our variance hearing. So there's Sweet Meadow Farm, both an application for a recreational camp for children and also the food establishment permit application. So Tom, would you like to discuss those two applications?
Yeah, so Julie was kind enough to send over several emails with some documentation that's required for her to submit. However, I don't know if she dropped off hard copies of that to town hall yet or not, but preferably it would be ideal if she did. I understand that.
Leave it.
Hi, could someone mute themselves?
Pam, please mute.
Sorry.
Yep.
Sorry, but I was just looking to see if I could see the hard copies of those documents and trying to confirm whether or not she sent over a healthcare policy. I was looking through emails this evening and I found some notes from the healthcare supervisor, but anything that is contributed by the healthcare supervisor, and each page needs to be initialed per the code as an acknowledgement. Any recommendations? I believe it's a physician that she has secured for that role, who's also one of the parents. But it's a good resource for her to have because she's been helping her verify her immunization records. And then just as an aside, being on meetings the past couple of days when they've been changing all the COVID policies, everything's getting lifted on the 29th, but they can't ask for verification of a COVID-19 vaccine. However, in this camp, that wouldn't be applicable because all of her campers are 12 or under.
What about for staff though, Thomas?
My understanding is you're not allowed because of HIPAA laws to ask for proof of vaccination. So I think it's kind of on the honor system as far as that goes. I know the recommendations are that people who aren't vaccinated, they should be in a separate cohort, if you will. Initially, the cohorts were a requirement. Now it's like a public health rationale, like recommendation, from what I'm hearing in discussion with Ellen too. So those staffers and campers that aren't vaccinated, it's recommended that they have the staff that's not vaccinated, it's recommended that they stay in a separate area.
And I guess so, and maybe this is for the doctors as well on this call. My understanding was
Right.
that you can't require employees or staff to be vaccinated, but you can indicate that if you're not vaccinated, you need to continue to wear masks. Is that something that can be,
So I think a private enterprise is totally free to require vaccination. I don't think there's a rule against that, and they also could get proof of that. I know my son might get it for camp, and I had to send in all the vaccination requirements. So I'm not sure that that's a HIPAA issue. It may be specific to COVID, but yeah, certainly if they're not vaccinated, you can require that they be separated or be masked.
right? So is that something just that can be part of the approval on the application that, in keeping with guidance and protocols that employees who cannot provide demonstration that they've been vaccinated, that they will remain masked, while in employ at the camp? Is that something that can be done or no?
I think that's a reasonable assumption.
I mean, I think that would be fine. I don't know if the other doctors have a different interpretation of HIPAA, and obviously I'm not a lawyer, thank God. But I think that they should be able to ask for that.
Yeah, that just seems easy, and I think it would make everybody comfortable.
And Ellen, do you have any comments about some of the other items that Tom had mentioned, the, signed individual pages, that sort of thing?
Yeah, no, I don't really get involved at all with the camp application.
Okay, but it didn't come into the office, it sounds like then.
Jean did not tell me that it came in today, so I have to
Okay.
assume it did not.
Okay, so it sounds like if we do have a motion and then look to approving this, it might be conditional to receipt of additional items, Tom, in your opinion?
Yeah, my opinion, in conditional on receipt, contingent on receiving some of all of the documents, rather hard copies. So it's quite a bit of information just to be able to review it. I know technology is great, especially we've learned during these times, but sometimes it's better to go through things the old-fashioned way and have a hard copy in front of you just to verify that everything's in order, which I'm sure it is, but just to make sure that we have everything we need.
Okay, that sounds, and when, I'm sorry, when are they planning on starting up this camp?
I think that on their application, it said June 14th.
Okay, so there is some time, but yes, keep reminding them, because sometimes we've received information so close to the start of the camp launch that it was difficult to get the information needed in a short amount of time and get.
Right, and I know Ellen had mentioned that the application was blank. Is that, or did you find a filled app?
They had submitted, let me see, quite a while ago, March 23rd, just the original, the first page and of the application, a handwritten copy. What they submitted electronically was completely blank. But we we have a handwritten one that came in back in March, along with the food permit application.
She's not up there now, but she was right next to you.
Oh, I understand. So we have at least one that's filled out. That's good.
Mayor or something. Not a mayor, but.
Can everyone mute who isn't speaking? Thank you.
Town clerk or something.
Okay. Oh, dear me.
I didn't mean to say nobody speak.
Okay, gee, I was gonna say my internet connection is unstable. So if I drop off at any point or can't hear people, I might have to ask for a little bit of help with that. But I am getting that notice periodically here, so. All right, so regarding the camp, Tom, does anyone else on the board or any of our guests have any questions about the camp at the moment?
I just, as far as the food permit, is Julie here with us, by the way? I know I had asked her to join.
I do not see her.
Okay. I know in the past, and I know Ellen could speak to this, that the reason they got the food permit supplementary to the camp permit was they brought in pizza for the kids to eat. Is that correct in the past, Ellen?
Yes.
Yeah, so I know that on the 29th, all restrictions are going to be lifted, and that would, to me, would include self-service that's been prohibited up until this point will be allowed to continue. But maybe just to take precautionary measures around being that a communal food item, as always, just be extra vigilant with the hand washing surrounding that, or maybe they can develop some sort of a methodology to have someone plate it out with a gloved, clean hand to the children, so they're not all handling the pizza with bare hands and things of that nature going on. So.
Okay, do you anticipate meeting with them or talking to them before?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll
launch?
definitely reiterate this when I conduct an inspection on site after I do the document review. So I'll certainly convey that to them at that point.
Okay, that'd be great. So are there any other issues anyone would like to raise? Otherwise, I'll ask if you want us to be approving this now, or shall we wait? Or shall we approve it conditional to you being able to complete your review to your satisfaction?
I would approve it conditional to the document review.
Okay. And receipt of course, all the appropriate documents. So, all right, do we have a motion to that effect?
Moved.
Second,
Okay, and so this will be for the recreational camp first. Any other discussion? Okay, Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Did you make, someone make a motion?
Yes, it was a motion. I just said,
Oh, okay, I didn't hear.
said along the lines, it was conditional to Tom receiving and being able to review all of the required documents.
I was the one who made the motion, Ellen, and it was amazing.
yeah,
I think I voted.
I
Aye.
think you did. So should I go?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay, Lisa, I. Rebecca, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Oh, great. Rebecca, I. Sorry, so my thing totally dropped, the signal. Sorry. So I had to sign back in, but I'm here.
Matt Vitale, aye.
okay, and then do we have a similar, well, for the food establishment permit, Tom, is that also in need of conditions?
I need to see some sort of a menu. I'm assuming it's going to be the same as years past, but I need to see a detailed menu of food served and how they're going to be served and how they're going to be held under temperature control, or if it's for immediate service, if it's pizza, and then issues obviously surrounding hand washing and handling of the food.
All right, so likewise, do we have a motion to grant a conditional or approval of the food establishment permit conditional to Tom, again, receiving all of the documents, being able to review procedures with Sweet Meadow Farm?
So moved.
Second,
Okay, Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa Camp, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Vitale, aye.
Okay. And do we have any other issues with you tonight, Tom?
I believe that is all, unless anybody has any questions or concerns.
Anybody?
I got nothing. Have a good night, Tom.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you all, as always. Take care.
You too. Okay. I haven't been paying attention to who's been coming on.
Yeah, can I just make a request for people who don't have their names identified? We need to track attendance for this public meeting. So the 508 number, if you could just identify yourself in the chat, as well as the person who just has the letter S. We need to keep record keeping of the attendees. So if you could provide that, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Ellen, are you, or Mark, are you aware of anyone who might be on for another issue that we could fit in before?
I do see Jeannie here for the town in respect to Farm Pond.
Okay.
I believe that's what Jeannie's here for, but I don't want to speak on her behalf, but I believe she's here for the
That's
pond.
what I'm here for.
Okay,
So,
thank you,
Mark,
Jeannie.
that's what I'm here for.
Thank you.
Okay. Who would like to kick off that discussion?
I can indicate to the board that they've applied. The beach testing has been reviewed and acceptable for the water. And they are starting on, I would say, small steps. They're planning to open up additional bathrooms as they get busier. Right now, they'll be using the handicap bathroom, and they're putting a porta toilet there, which they did last year. I did pass it by plumbing as we went through 21 South Main Street. We realized that toilets are under the plumbing inspector, so that's why Jeannie went through Tom Frasca, and he was okay with it. And so with that noted, I would recommend approval of the Farm Pond bathing beach permit for the year 2021.
And is there a reason that the bathrooms are going to be restricted again?
I hadn't planned on restricting the bathrooms. The porta potties is there for mostly for swimmers that are there in the morning, or people come in with boats. That's what we've used it for. We're going to open up both sides of the bathroom. The men's room is pretty stuffed with equipment right now. Once that's cleaned out, and the ladies' room, neither one was opened last year. So the head guards, were meeting with them on Monday, and they have a list of things that have to be done.
Okay, and what is the opening date?
It's going to be Memorial Day, the Saturday of Memorial Day weekend. So it'll be Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then weekends only until school gets out, which I believe is June 18th.
Okay, so that day is, okay, the 29th, right? That's
right.
What I was wondering. And so there are issues with the virus being in the air, particularly around bathrooms. So I don't know, have the doctors heard of any new data on that? Is that anything that we should be particularly concerned with?
I don't think so. I mean, I think bathrooms would be considered indoors. So any rules that are applicable indoors would apply. But since this is after May 29th, I think they'd be rescinded.
Yep.
So I think my level of the things I'm worried about you getting at the Farm Pond bathroom, COVID is relatively low on the list.
Okay.
I will say
Agreed.
that.
Would continue to encourage hand washing after using the toilet, but that should go without saying.
And they do
And
have
that
hand
should
washing
go without saying.
facilities.
And the doors are usually left open to, I know the women's
Yes.
room. I assume the men's room as well, and that I think should continue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the doors will continue to be open. They've always been open. The only
Excellent.
one that probably isn't, even the handicap bathroom, is the door is open because it has a separate door inside.
Okay. All right. So
And they
again,
do have,
since
if I just want to note too, Doug McDougall, the Farm Pond director, indicated they're going to repaint the markers on the sidewalk, so people going individually to the restrooms. So he's planning to do that this summer as well.
Oh, okay. All right. And Lisa, did you
Yeah, I
have
just
any
wanna-
or hear any particular concerns?
Yeah, I think some people were asking for clarity that the lovely reservation system will no longer be in effect, which I said I don't see any reason why it would be, as.
It will not be in effect. We are going to start with no reservations, no grids, and we hope that everybody is used to social distancing, but it doesn't even sound like that's going to be an issue. So
I don't think so. And then was the lottery also for out of town folks in effect this year?
we did hold it. We have pulled 125 names. So we're again, unless there was a very large swim meet, we've never had an overcrowding at Farm Pond. So
I think people will be very happy to hear all this, Jeannie. So
yeah, I think so.
Thanks.
Okay. And actually, I'd say everybody I met last year was pretty happy that the pond was open at all. So, but this will be better.
We pulled off before any other town, so it was good.
Yep. Okay.
Jeff has his hand up, Daryl.
Okay.
I
Jeff?
had a quick question for Jeannie and the team. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jeannie, but I thought I had heard that they won't be having snappers. That a bunch of towns are not doing swim clubs. So, is that true?
Recreation did announce it. I was on a Metro West recreation meeting last week, and most of the towns are not having swim team. The only one that they were was Medfield, and they didn't know who they were going to swim against.
Okay. And I think they used Kingsbury Club for their swim team, I think.
Right, but they're part of the Suburban Swim League, and it didn't sound like anyone other than Medfield had signed up.
Yep. Okay. Just want to confirm. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Mark, do you need us to, are you recommending approval and do you need us to?
Yes, I recommend approval of the Farm Pond Bathing Beach permit for 2021.
Okay, no conditions, sounds like.
No conditions. Obviously, they have to follow the beach regulations. If let's hope we don't have any high bacteria levels. I'll keep my fingers crossed for them, but you know, they know the routine if it does happen.
Right.
Well, we just to let you know, we do have a really good way of keeping the geese off the beach, and we're hoping it works again this year.
And Jeannie, I'm sure you saw this, but there is a new algal bloom cyano.
Right. And we the Farm Pond Advisory Committee is very on top of that. We've got the Yacht Club is going to help us out with if anybody's out locating it. And the testing, we have the testing facility ready to go. And the Farm Pond Advisory Committee is amazing as far as that goes.
So glad to hear it. That's awesome. Great.
And the signs are up already for that?
The signs are up already, yes.
Excellent. Okay. All right, so do we have a motion to approve the Farm Pond Bathing Beach permit?
So moved.
Oops.
Seconded.
Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, aye.
Becca Honeywell, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay.
I'm also now reflecting on how Lisa totally should have done the camp permit, because we would have had a beaver permit from Matt last time and a camp permit this time. And we missed the
I'm
chance.
so sorry.
Remove funny bone, Matt. Remove funny bone.
All right. Do we have a 5-minute item? Oh, how about the Natick Walpole VNA invoice for ratification? Did everyone get a chance to see that?
I think it seemed reasonable.
Or I can bring it up. All right, let me try to bring it up. All right, I'm trying something new. Are you seeing the invoice?
Yep.
Yep.
Woohoo. right, so as usual, hopefully I won't blink out saying my internet connection is unstable again. All right. Similar to past months, I did approve this for timely payment reasons.
I think it looks reasonable. I guess, Ellen, do you have any sense of, in terms of sort of the Maven time, I would expect that probably is
motion to ratify my approval.
so moved.
Seconded.
Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Okay, let's see. Do we have a 3-minute item? Notice to local boards of health. People see that about flushing of water in systems that haven't been used in a long time.
I saw it, but have not read it in detail.
Okay, where's the high point?
Always good advice.
Read the bold. That's really all you need to know.
Pretty standard.
Yeah, the schools already had followed that guidance when they had opened back up. So, all right, so noted. Let's see, all right, do we have something that'd take 2 minutes?
Yeah, I have a quick, I guess, question update.
Okay.
Board. I think we can remove the signage at the tennis courts. That still it's outdated at this point because it's reflecting like phase 2B requirements for masking, et cetera, and all of that has been lifted for both pickleball and tennis as low risk sports. So I think we can maybe convey to the Sherborn DPW and Addie May that we can take that sign down off the courts. And then my only other comment, I guess, is that I think we should provide some kind of guidance to the Sherborn Rec Department, because I know, for example, there's still all the kids and teachers, most of which are double vax for the tennis program, are still wearing masks and et cetera. So I just think, as a town, we should provide guidance that's consistent with the state and the CDC for low risk outdoor sports. I don't really see the need to continue to require masking, especially for the vaccinated staff. So is that something that we should convey, Daryl, or do we stay out of that?
So I know that Ellen and Matt have been having communications because there's something a little different going on at the school level, and also coordinating with Dover. So I don't know, Ellen and Matt.
I think it's going to be more than a minute. I think we should tackle that under other COVID update, but I think it'll just take more time.
Yeah, then, okay, and it is 7:30. So, all right, Lisa, we'll get back to that. Don't let us forget.
But this is separate from the schools. I just want to make that clear. Separate.
I think there's a whole like youth sports discussion and masking that just needs clarification that'll take longer. So why don't we just cover it all together?
Okay.
Okay, so it is 7:30. We have a variance hearing for 262 Western Avenue for a septic replacement and expansion. And Ellen, before we begin, did you receive all of the green cards?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and is Mr. McIntyre here?
Yes, Dan McIntyre here representing the homeowners.
All right, fantastic. I will pull up something in just a moment. She says optimistically. All right. All right, so here is the locus.
So this lot is right on the corner of Western Avenue and Brook Street.
Western and Brook. Am I pointing to the right ones, I think?
Yes.
All right, and now I will expand this. I guess that's about as big as I can get it.
That's perfect.
All right, take it away.
So
Oh,
the
wait, no,
homeowners-
sorry, before you start,
Oh,
do we
yeah.
have any abutters here this evening? Okay. If there is an abutter and you just didn't get to unmute in time, the way we'll do this is the engineer will present reasons of why the variances are being requested. The board may ask questions, the health agent may ask questions or have comments, and then if you haven't heard your any questions that you have or issues, certainly a chance for you to weigh in. All right, sorry, back to you, Dan.
All right. So this is an existing 3-bedroom home. The homeowners are starting to experience problems with their system. There was no real design of it. It's currently located in the lawn area just south of what's shown as the arbor, kind of where the new tank is proposed. That's where the existing system is now. It's at least portions of it are within 100 feet of the existing well. So we're proposing to put in a Title V septic system to meet the Sherborn well offset of 125 feet and meet all of Title V requirements. The lot does have a relatively high groundwater table. I think it's really a pursed water table at about 3.5 feet. So we are asking for the waiver to both the groundwater being within 5 feet of the surface and the 5-foot groundwater offset. We're requesting a 4-foot groundwater offset to comply with Title V. And when we're doing that, really to minimize the amount of grading toward the property line, as well as eliminate a pump for the system. We can keep it gravity if we can stay the 4 feet. Overall, it's a significant improvement of having the system further from the well. So with that, I think I can take any questions. It's a conventional type system, a stone and pipe system. We're not proposing any alternative technologies. But as I say, it is a Title V system.
Okay, and it looks like, again, once you get the setbacks from the wells, the 2 wells.
Yep.
Doesn't seem to be much advantage to going elsewhere on the property because I assume then you would just need more fill to make up for it, so.
More tree clearing and more fill if we move back further. Yes.
So is this a replacement primarily due to, like the system's just not functioning properly, it's old and making it
That's
more
it.
compliant?
Yeah,
But is there expansion too? I was just a little confused by the title. Is there like plans to have an addition on the house as well, or is this just?
No, there are no plans right now to have an addition, but we are asking for the +1 now, just in case in the future they want to do something. We've got it designed in place.
And nothing beyond that, the standard +1 ask.
No, it would be a 4-bedroom house if anything were done in the future.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any questions, or Mark, do you have any comments?
Dan and I spoke about the tree well. It's right now in question if they're going to put that tree well in. You'll see it to the lower on the grading, lower right there. If so, I told Dan there's requirements and policies on tree wells that would have to be followed. That could be addressed with the as-built. But if it is to be constructed right now, Dan has indicated it's up in the air if they're going to save that tree or not.
Donald Crawshaw, can you please mute? You're unmuted and bringing in background noise.
So yeah, that tree well would be about 18 inches tall. And we're really going to kind of wait to see the excavation for the septic system to really see how many roots we destroy. And then make a decision on whether just to take it down or not. But if we want to leave it up, we're proposing to put basically some boulders around there. And the top 3 trenches all meet the breakout separation without interfering with the tree well. The bottom trench has the impervious barrier there, and we are about 15 feet away from the tree well. So I think we're all set there, Mark, but we can confirm that on the as-built.
That would be fine.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns? We could always do it as well, it's going to be pretty quick because there aren't a lot of variances, but let me bring up the variance letter. All right, so we'll just go through these, well, one by one, pretty quick. Do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 8.01?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other discussion?
And just to note, Darrell, there are places where the septic system is 5 feet to groundwater, but in other areas it is 4 feet. So it's a mix.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so Darrell, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
And then the companion piece, do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 8.02?
So moved.
Second.
Darrell, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, so we can close the hearing, and are the plans ready for approval, Mark?
Yes, they are conditional to a deed recording for the garbage grinder request that's being requested within this plan.
Okay, so do we have a motion with that condition?
So moved.
Second.
Darrell, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's see. So we have a few moments before the next one. All right. Let's see. Do we have anyone else here for any of your business, Mark, that we can take care of in
I
10
saw
minutes?
one applicant here, but it was for a permit that was approved last time. I'm not for sure. It was Pam Dowse. She asked a question on the heterotrophic plate count, which they did, and it passed, just so the board knows, but I'm not sure if she's here for that purpose.
Okay, well,
Pam?
Come, we didn't see Anne or.
Pam, do you have any questions about that, or are you set?
I don't have any questions. That's great. Thank you.
Sure.
One voice is enough.
okay. All right, so is 33 Ashlane or 29 Prospect a 10-minute sort of thing?
I think so, Darrell. I can
Okay.
probably, both are very easy because they've been updated to meet what's required. So if you want, whichever one you want to start, do you want to go to 33 Ashlane?
Yeah.
Okay, and on 33 Ashlane, I would suggest, it's hard to see it, but look to the left of the leaching area where the grading was extended quite a bit. They got plenty of land out there, but it was resource intensive to bring in fills. So now they're planning, you'll see if you go a little further down on the plan, it defines the retaining wall, and it which is about 5 feet tall, just so you know. It's funny, I'm moving my arrow thinking I'm moving your arrow. I apologize. But if you look, it's you'll see the base of the wall. It's about 5 feet, 5.5 feet high. That wall that has a little note at the bottom of the plan to the right, to the left of siltation barrier. The wording, that is, just so you can
Oh,
see the
sorry.
wording.
Yeah.
So the wording is right, you go up with the arrow right there. That's the wording on the
Mhm.
structural retaining wall. They prefer to go that route to put that in. And then also the impermeable barrier further up to save on soil. And they feel they're going to save money doing this, or resources. I'll say resources. I don't see an issue with it. I'm recommending approval.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions about that? It sounds like, so they're going for, rather than extending a lot of soil to get the right kind of slope.
Correct. And the
They're-
board had seen this plan before. They're adding on to
Mhm.
that house, and they're adding on to the
Yeah.
septic system, which they're allowed to do. The septic system was put in under the new Title V provisions, which gives them the opportunity to add additional trenches. So they're doing that, as well as with doing that, they have to do additional grading. So with the grading now, they're planning to basically use walls and impermeable barriers versus spreading that grade out 3 to 1 for a distance.
Okay, and did they need to go back before Concom for approval for this, or because they were within the footprint of what they had planned before? It was okay.
They received approval from conservation. We couldn't have the plan on until then.
Okay, and do we need to give you formal approval, I presume would be helpful, right?
Yeah, I would recommend the board approve
Reapprove.
this revised septic system as presented.
Okay, do we have a motion for that?
So moved.
Second,
Seconded.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay. Gee, maybe we can even fit in the other one. Which was,
I believe so, Daryl. That one should be easy as well. The board's seen this, well, I don't know if the board's seen it yet, but it's been revised a few times based on. the
29
soil
Prospect.
testing. Yes, that's 29 Prospect. So the recent plan, they had to put a couple notes on this plan because a couple things happened here. One, they've had equipment out there doing soil testing 2 different times, once this year and once last year. What happened was they couldn't prove that they had 5 feet of suitable soil below the septic system. And they were hitting, and I saw them moving large boulders, but they didn't want to bring an excavator in. So when they went back out last month, they did prove that they have 5 feet of naturally occurring soil. They're including the B layer. So they had to do a perk test in the B layer, the second layer below grade. And they're going to use that. So that means the system has to be above that. So the system's raised considerably in the section of the most recent deep hole because of the need to be having 5 feet of naturally occurring. And the reason this is all required is they're not asking for waivers. They're going from 2 bedrooms to 4 bedrooms. It's a small house, and they wanted to make sure they met all new requirements. The one thing that had to be explained, and it is now noted on this plan, is that that was not ledge that they found this year in the deep hole. It was a rock that they couldn't move, and I was there to observe it. It's just I wanted that on the plan because if it wasn't, they should be 6 feet from ledge. In this case, it's not ledge, and they have 5 feet of soil below the bottom of the soil absorption system. They also had to make a quick note that they had to extrapolate the groundwater to the septic tank. With that all said, I would recommend approval of this plan, and should be noted it's for new construction.
And that there's also a new well.
Oh, Ellen, after all that, I forgot, yes, before this, there's a condition that they have a new well approved and the old well abandoned before the septic system can be put in place. The present well is too close to the proposed septic system. Thank you, Ellen. I had it on my note. I wasn't looking at my plan. I was looking at the screen. But that is indeed correct. This has to be approved conditional to old well abandoned, new well approved with potable water before the installation of the septic system.
Okay, so yes, interesting that they were able to confirm that that was rock rather than bedrock.
The machine moved it a little bit, but these rubber tired machines just can't do the work of an excavator.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions about this?
And we did see a lot of large boulders on surface too. So that's what it is. There are large boulders in that area.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So do we have a motion to approve the plans subject to
The condition that the well be abandoned and the new well be approved for potable water before the septic system permits released.
Excellent.
Is a garbage grinder deed recording needed?
Thank you for being on that side. Yes, and may have to do a garbage grinder deed recording. I have it all written right here on the side of my plan, but I'm looking at the screen. I apologize. Thank you, Ellen.
Ellen's on it, you know.
She is on it. I wouldn't be available. She's the other half of my mind at times. Thank you.
All right. Do we have a motion for that? All of it?
Seconded.
Okay, second. Any other discussion? Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Matt Vitelli, aye.
Okay. All right. And my computer's misbehaving. All right. Let's see. Oh, goodness. Anyone have any agenda items for the next meeting? I will note that, well, Ellen has here, there are 4 variance hearings scheduled. The next bunch of meetings are going to have lots of variance hearings because there are an amazing number of applications before the board at this time.
Daryl, so I don't know if this is, I don't know how urgent it is, so we can play it by ear what agenda we want to put it on, but there was that memorandum from Framingham discussing potential water hookups for select residences in the, Kendall Street area, et cetera. So just seemed like people were interested in that. So I don't know if you want to put that on.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I just saw that today or yesterday.
So I don't think it's an emergency, but so we can see, Ellen, whatever meeting looks like it has fewer variance hearings scheduled. We can throw it on that one.
Yeah, the next 2 meetings, June 2nd and June 16th, both already have 4 variance hearings.
Yeah, so we can put that on a later one. We don't have, it's
Okay.
not urgent, I don't think.
What's the meeting that's going to have 6 or 7? Is that-
Well, I don't know. I was
Oh,
thinking
okay, depends on.
it might have been the 16th, but the time has passed, so I think it may not happen.
Okay. All right. Okay, I think we're close enough. Let's see, we'll get ready with the next hearing. So we have a variance hearing for, it's a continuation from our last meeting. It's for 13 Coursebrook Road for a septic replacement. And I hope GLM is here, and let me.
Yes, Joyce Hastings from GLM Engineering.
Okay.
May I share my,
Hi.
hi, may I share my screen?
Hold on a second. Yeah, Matt, go ahead.
So given that this is a continuation and we've already had fairly extensive discussion at the last meeting, what I'd like to propose is that the board focus primarily on either any follow-up issues that were raised on the last meeting or any design features that require variance, as opposed to design features that don't require variance or meet Sherborn regulations.
I think that makes sense.
Okay.
Can you explain what that means?
So for example, there are elements that we discussed last time, such as the setback to the property line, that don't require a variance. And so while an abutter may not be enthusiastic about that, it sort of satisfies the regulation. So I don't know as a board that we can say you can't do it because it's otherwise permitted. I think those concerns have been shared with the board again, but given that we needed to continue the last hearing because of its extent, I think it's important for us to focus on resolving the variance issues that we need to address, as well as the 2 follow-up issues related to the confirmation of the well location and the clarification about the surface cover and paddock use in an area over a soil absorption system.
So how about we start with Mark? Would you like to talk about the paddock?
Sure. At the last meeting, there was discussion on the use of the area as a paddock. So I spoke with Claire Golden. She's with the Northeast Regional Department of Environmental Protection. And she said there's no rulings against it, but again, they will have to make sure that they have mature vegetation in place before we can sign off the final certificate. We can issue a conditional one as we do for most, because sometimes, especially if it's winter, that's difficult for the grass to grow quickly. She did recommend that the other thing is to make sure that the weight of the horses is considered when designing the system. And I spoke to Rob Truax, and he said he feels and has determined H20 loading is not needed. I'm not an expert on the weight of a horse, but I think Rob indicated around 1,500 pounds. He may have received that from the owner of the property who has horses. But again, that would be the only consideration. And of course, to have the mature vegetation so that the grades stay in place and are stabilized. So that came from Claire Golden. I spoke to her, I think it was last week or the week before. There were a couple minor edits that had to be made, which have been made. So I'm satisfied with the plan as presented.
I will
ask
say,
a question?
can I just give one quick comment that this is a second revision to the plan, and there is a $150 fee due.
That is correct. They had to update the well too. So this didn't just have minor edits, it had a well location change, and GLM did go out there to locate the well. According to, I believe, land surveying practices, Joyce is a professional land surveyor. She could probably indicate how they determine the well location.
Okay, before we get to the well location, just go back to the horses for a moment. So is the weight limit for total weight of all horses, if there are multiples?
Well, and that would be one thing that Claire said is management of the area, if it's a paddock, to move them around a little bit so that if they're in one area, maybe see if they could rope it off and put them in another area so that they manage their use of the area and not have like 10 horses standing in the same spot. But usually they don't stand that close together, not like cows might. So with this being horses, she didn't see too much of an issue.
Okay, and it's not subject to, horses per area. It's just some total weight that could be on the system at one time, it sounds like.
Correct. And Rob indicated too that the covering over the septic system, these are Elgins, also stabilizes and allows for the weight as well. So he felt with the weight of a horse and the way it's distributed from the cover over the system, it shouldn't be an issue. And Claire Golden did not seem to have an issue either.
I feel like
thought that
high
I'm
school.
not a horse person, but 3 horses in the size of this paddock seems like a lot. I don't know what's the normal.
Yeah,
Paddock is not just the area under the soil absorption system. I think the soil absorption system is part of a larger paddock area.
Right, a quarter acre was the size for 3 horses. I don't know, it sounds kind of small.
Well, if I can just add
as a horse
one more
professional,
item.
I can help out.
Oh, sorry, just one more item, and and then I'll let the chair run the meeting. One more item is that she did say that, when you have the horses over this, that's why the mature vegetation, so that the ground is in place and can't erode and so forth. So that's how important the mature vegetation is. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I'm going to go through the chair anytime I wish to speak at this point.
Okay, and I believe that having the vegetation stabilizing the soils over the system is a benefit to the longevity and performance of the system. Is it not, Mark?
That is correct, Daryl. That's how important the mature vegetation is for this paddock.
Okay. And if it, okay, so were there
Could I
other,
possibly, I'm sorry.
yes, go
Could
ahead.
I possibly speak up about this? Is it possible I could show my screen for a second?
Whatever you can, but whatever you show, you have to send to Ellen because it's part of the public record.
Yeah, no problem. All right. So I spoke today to Elgin. I spoke to a person named Lee Shamblin. He's their technical rep. And I said, what do you recommend putting a paddock on top of an Elgin GSF system? His first words were definitely not. It causes compaction to the soil so that it can't absorb the waste effectively. He also said there's an opportunity for the pipes to be crushed. So he was very clear that that's not a good thing to put on top of an Elgin system. I also looked at Penn State College Agricultural and Sciences Pasture Management Program. They said to maintain grass, you have 1 horse per 2 acres and then 2 horses per 3+ acres. This is to keep grass because they're going to be stomping on it. They're going to be eating it. So I don't see how we're going to grow grass in this area and allow the system to operate effectively with 2 horses on a 1/4 acre. In addition, there's the effluent and water from the barn and rain and snow flowing downhill into the system. And there is even a Sherborn Board of Health regulation where it says other liquids cannot be discharged into the sewage system. And the technical rep from Elgin also mentioned other liquids and surface water should be diverted from the system. So I just want to say, it does not make sense to me or to Elgin that you have a paddock on top of the system and expect it to absorb the waste and operate effectively.
Can I ask a question? Because I guess I forgot a little from last time. Is this proposal being put forth because the current system is in failure?
Yes.
So,
Actually, Joyce, is that the case? And also, Joyce, would you like to address the comments about the Elgin system? Suitability under a paddock?
I can't unmute.
we actually can hear you,
We can hear
Joyce.
you.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, now I don't have a camera, excuse me. So this is being upgraded because the existing septic system.
Oops, you just went on mute, Joyce.
I think Joyce may have disappeared altogether, so I think we should.
Yeah, well, I can see her. Now I can see her. Joyce, you went off. Now we can hear you. Yes.
Okay. The existing septic system has failed. That is correct.
And can you speak to some of the concerns that were raised about the compaction and erosion potential for having a paddock over the proposed Elgin system?
Yes. So we have
We lost you again.
as long as Mark pointed out, as long as we maintain the proper cover over the system and that it's stabilized with grass and grown and maintain good cover, there has not been a problem. And typically, as someone pointed out, horses don't stand all together in a group. It's not like it's typically 1 or 2 horses walking over it. It's not a case of it will exceed its capacity for horses standing on a septic system at one time in the same exact spot.
May I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Can you explain to me, have other sites on this this is a very small house lot. Can you explain to me the technical assessment that has been done of the other locations on this small lot? Like in front of the house, for example, on the road, and on the opposite corner of the lot.
And can you stop sharing just so we can see the plans with Daryl, please?
Yeah, that would be helpful.
So if you scroll down a little bit to look at the front of the lot, you'll note that the wells are in the front of the house. So the septic system can't go in the front of the house. And then in the rear, this was the area that worked the best for as far as grading, and this is the area that they'd like to place the system. This was just a choice they made. It's not, it meets all the requirements as far as setbacks from everything goes quite nicely.
I'm just thinking that the other corner, the opposite corner on the same side of the house, would not have the compaction risk. And it might be a similar distance from their own well.
But what I would say is again, and this is a little bit me wearing my homeowner hat, but we had to put in a new septic last year and had particular feelings about where we wanted to go on our property. And I think in as much as the homeowner, I think we can certainly say whether or not we'll allow a soil absorption system under a paddock. I think that's in our purview, but the decision of the homeowner about where they want to site it in their property, so long as there's no variance deriving therefrom, I think is up to the homeowner. And so,
well, of course, I'm asking for the scientific assessment. That's all, because that is our purview. The scientific assessment is our purview.
If they met all the requirements, Rebecca, then it can't, then it means if it meets all the setback requirements, then I think it's in a different place. And I think I asked that same question last time, did they even check out the soils in that area?
I would like to hear the engineer answer the question, because that's all I'm interested in is the scientific assessment.
She did answer the question. She said this is where they want it.
Yeah, I asked the same question last time, so she did answer.
Well, are the other, okay, can I just please talk to the engineer? If the other corner is considered, it would have higher potential functioning of the septic system itself. And so as a Board of Health, we might be able to advise the homeowners that even though I can understand that they would like to have it in that place, that it would work better in another place if the other place has a better, is technically preferable. So I'm just interested in their assessment. Has there been a perk test or any evaluation of that corner?
well, so I don't think there've been test pits of that corner. I think that's right. So there is no data because they assessed the area they wanted to put the system and they've listed the test pits on the plan.
Yeah, right. So that's why I was asking the engineer if they had done any assessment there.
We have not. I'm sorry. It's Rob Truax. I just got off my other meeting, even though it says Joyce on my screen. We did not do any testing in that area. This was the preferred area by the homeowner. You wanted to preserve the area behind the house in case you wanted to do something in the future back there, maybe a swimming pool or whatever. So this was the area he was looking to, this was his first choice of where he would like to have it in the yard.
I just ask a quick question. Matt, you bring up the fact that, if it meets all the setbacks, et cetera, then it should be able to go where the homeowner wants. But in fact, that spot requires a variance. Isn't it up to the homeowner to check first if there's other locations that don't potentially require a variance?
So I think the first thing to frame is right now the system's in failure. So every single thing that's contemplated is better for the groundwater than no action. So in terms of what the homeowner is required to do, then they need to do test pits and put together a proposal. I think that every single homeowner who applies for a septic replacement is making some set of trade-offs about what the landscape's going to do, what part of your property you want trees cut down, where you may want to have fill added if you've got an old system. And so we don't require and have never required property owners to say, you need to test at least 2 distinct areas, or you need to test at least 4 distinct areas. When they dug and tested for my home, as a personal example, there was an enormous pit in my backyard that was dug very carefully, and the engineer did a wonderful job and everything went well. But it wasn't trivial to say, this is a little hole. It was a backhoe tearing up my lawn, digging an enormous pit in the ground and doing testing. And so it's not a reasonable expectation to tell homeowners that, hey, you need to do these samples throughout your property, so long as they're not saying, hey, the only place I tested was 4 feet from my property line. That would be an issue. But so far as where they're testing generally aligns, they don't need to come up with a kind of broad property sampling. I do think it's within the board's purview to say, do we have an expectation that the paddock or that pattern of use is appropriate? And I think that certainly can be something that's weighed in. But the homeowner doesn't owe us testing kind of every possible location on the property, particularly when they're not requesting a variance for it. The times that we have that discussion is when they're requesting a variance for well distance or property line. And then we say, help us understand why you put it there, because that's one of the variances you're asking for. And you have to help tell that story so that we understand why you're seeking that variance. In this case, that doesn't apply. That would be the case in which we need to say and understand, why did you pick this spot, and help make the case that there's not an alternative location that would not require this variance.
I forgot, what's down gradient of the proposed Elgin system? So the other thing to consider is this is in an area where there's going to be nice down gradient flow towards the back of everybody's property. So there's not going to be cross gradient flow or flow towards the road or the other residences or the wells. It's all inclining towards the back. So what's behind where the gradation's going to, like, what's on the other side of that?
Can I just point out that there is an impervious barrier here at the bottom of the system? So if the system doesn't work, which we don't think it will because the grass is not going to go there, it would flow over to our property. It's not going to flow down, it's going to flow out the sides because there's that barrier at the bottom of the system.
I don't think that's necessarily the way that groundwater works, but can I ask the engineer what's on the other side of the property boundary on the down gradient edge?
It's just undeveloped land, Mr. Chairman. It's that's the Mayo's farm. They have the horse farm over there. They have the outdoor arenas, indoor arenas, and riding trails throughout that whole area. It's a big piece of land.
Okay. And there's a brook.
Pointing on the
Horse brook.
Yeah, the brook's well over 200 feet away from the site. And the barrier is just, it's a breakout barrier. It's an impervious line, and we do this. It's very common on a lot of the systems. And it doesn't cause, the flow is not going to travel around the barrier and break out the side of the hill towards the house. The barrier actually comes up around the sides as well. And it's just there, so it's required on a slope like that. And the slope on this site is going to stay relatively the same as what's out there now. So the surface flows are going to continue to flow in the same direction, go down the back of the yard. The homeowner knows that he has to vegetate the area. It has to have grass. It has to be vegetated. It has to be stabilized over the system. So I've discussed this with him in detail, and it does not seem to be an issue with him.
And so they can do something different than now. There is no grass there, but they will be able to maintain grass in the future because it does need to be not just for purposes of getting the certificate of compliance, but it needs to be in perpetuity over the system.
So would there be, while the vegetation is taking root, would there be maybe a little bit of fencing around that area to promote that the maturation of the vegetation and like a good mat in that area so that there won't be constant, sort of tromping over it with the horses? Is that something that could be maybe achievable?
That will most likely be done because they're going to have to corral that area off to build it. Number one, they can't have the horses walking around when they dig the area out put in the sand. So that'll already be taking place during the construction. And then they'll maintain that until they have vegetative growth.
If I may add, hi, I'm Nathan Berkowitz. If I may just add a quick comment here.
Yes, go ahead.
I don't know if you can see my little cursor here, but where the system is, it's split in between two, kind of walking paddocks, okay? Our horses right now are out in the front here, in front of the barn, and out behind the house on beautiful grass pastures, okay? The time they spend on these little paddocks here is from time to time. They're also in front of the barn, okay, as they are right now on a beautiful night with no bugs, and also behind the house, which I can't really show you because it's over here, which is all beautiful grassed areas. So pretty much everything except for the existing dwelling, the existing barn, and our front yard is used by two horses, okay, which are 1,250 pound animals. If you distribute the weight, it's less than a heavy duty lawnmower. It's really, I mean, they love it out here. It's nice, green, very well maintained quality of pasture here and out behind the house. This is, and even when they're up in the barn area, this area underneath the left-hand side of the barn is an overhang where if there's any inclement weather, any mud or anything, they're in between their stalls and this overhang. They're not tromping around down here where there is a little bit of a slope. It's not appealing to them. So if anything, we're stabilizing the earth. We're improving a very bad situation where we have a failed system. We'd like to think that our engineers have gone by the Commonwealth's and the more stringent Sherborn rules and regs and designed a system that's going to work efficiently for this house and our family. And we'd like to ask the board to please grant us, as you move that over, I can see a little bit more. Everything where the proposed tank is, all this area behind us is all now beautiful pasture. And the horses are right there right now. I'm looking up back and my horse is right there out back here, not on top of this little area here where there's a proposed system. So it's a small part of our entire area. And I would like to request that, we move this discussion to grant us as a family here who lives in Sherborn and the opportunity to improve our home so it's safe and hygienically clean for our family and everybody else. Thank you.
And I'd like to just add one other comment. If we consider the other variance hearing we had that took about 9 minutes, the setback to the property line for that was 22 feet and to the neighbor's well was 150 feet. And so as we enter kind of the second hour of discussing this, again, I think to Mr. Berkowitz's point, like we have sets of rules. If people meet those rules, we need to do it. And we're starting from a system that's in failure. I'm concerned that we're applying a standard here that's different than other hearings that we've had. And that, again, I think that we can make the requirements of this is the performance, but we don't adjudicate with other people whether their kids drive the quad across the lawn or whether, what their patterns of use are, whether there's a basketball court that's next to it, whether there's a tennis court that's adjacent. And I think we just have to be cautious about creating new pieces because concerns have been raised, which I think are valid. But again, that I think we're limited to requiring, we need to mature vegetation, which I think the board would unanimously support that. Like, we don't think the Elgin can work appropriately if we don't have mature vegetation maintained over it. I think that's a clear requirement. But I think that then boils in a lot of the other concerns related to the paddock and the presence of equine.
Can I make a comment? I've had my hand up for a while.
Yes, go ahead.
I don't know if you've ever walked, but I mean, my husband and I do a lot of walking. We see a lot of neighborhoods, and for instance, at Pleasant Lane and Western, there's a very big horse farm there, and the horses don't just walk around, they do eat the grass. I mean, they actively eat grass, and that horse farm, even though it's acres and acres, and the horses are not out there all the time by any means, looks like a putting green. So I don't know. I think if I were on the board, I would probably want to figure out, how often do you inspect this or something? Because I think one of the worries I might have is that, over time, if the horses come back over this area, that they really could eat down the vegetation, and then possibly, it just becomes an issue. And especially these are 1 acre lots, that could be a problem. And the wetlands it's not jurisdictional for wetlands, obviously, but it is true that kind of downslope toward the Mayo Farm is all wetlands in that direction. It does seem like. Oh, Matt, let me just finish up. I was going to say, it just seems like.
we just need to be able to run it as the board. Like, I totally hear the comments. Rebecca had her hand up too and is on the board, so should get to speak. And I think that the board needs to be able to acknowledge people and proceed with the hearing.
I think that I was acknowledged and I made my comment.
No, I totally, I hear that. My point is, I think that we need to be able, right now, everybody's, like you open with, I've had my hand up for a while, totally valid. I also think that like the board member should be able to address it. And I think, again, this is our second hour of a hearing process. It typically takes about 15 minutes. And so I think that we need to be able to move the business forward. And so I'd like to have Rebecca speak, and then I'd like to have discussion within the board before we have additional public comment.
I have my hand up too after Rebecca.
Oh, perfect. Far away. So maybe Rebecca, you're first, and then Lisa.
Thanks. I would love to know if the system, last week I had, or whenever we discussed it last, I had asked if there's a way to customize this customizable system. So it might be more spread out in a linear way across the end of this piece of property that might not only allow it to function better as a septic system, but remove a portion of it from under the paddock, because I have concerns about that, the functioning under a paddock. And the
I would point out again that we can have concerns.
I didn't hear a comment from the homeowners about that, if it had been investigated. I understand if it's costly. I don't know what those numbers are. Also, obviously, if they're homeowners, they want to choose where they put their septic system, but I would love to know if it's possible to investigate the opposite corner, because if we could put it in without a variance, it would be great on a lot of different levels. And it sounds like it might be beneficial for the grading and the potential wetlands and all that other stuff.
I think, Rebecca, that's such a slippery slope, because then we're going to have abutters dictating to people who are compliant with all of our regulations about where they would prefer the system be. So I just think we need to be very mindful.
But I'm not doing this for the abutters. I'm talking about the functioning of the septic system as a septic system, thinking about the big picture of the town.
Right,
but they meet the requirements. The location of this is fine. I think we can't have further discussion on the location. Like I think we cannot have further discussion on the location. Like, they meet the requirements. Like, we don't get to tell them like what shape their field is or where it is. Like, we don't have that regulation. So I think we need to end discussion on location, assuming the setback from the wells and the property lines is fine. I think we can decide if we can dictate that there's mature vegetation, and that's about what we can do. And then we can move on to the actual variances. Like, I think we don't have the power as a board to say your field needs to be in this shape or it needs to be in this place, other than it meets the requirements.
So a couple of things I'll mention too, that if the concern is about the paddock and the impact on the system, to negatively impact one's own system is not going to be good for the homeowner. I'm sure the homeowner appreciates that. And although the Board of Health does not have the right to just access somebody's property to inspect without, we always ask before we go onto anybody's property and get approval for anything. So if there was not to be vegetation there in the future, we have the authority to require that some action be taken, but we don't go to look at it. But I will point out that there are neighbors who can see this, and we could probably be possibly be invited by neighbors to take a look at it. So if that turns into some sort of a problem and there's erosion, there's no vegetative cover, I just do want the homeowner to be aware that it might come to us having to require that action be taken in the future to maintain the grass, although the homeowner was very confident that they would be able to do that. So may or may not be an issue, but I just wanted to point that out.
And if I could add on, I mean, I have neighbors who have goats. They eat the grass, you know, throughout their yard. And so if we're going to start trying to regulate like what kind of animals can or can't eat grass over people's systems, I think, you know, that's just opening a whole other set of, you know, potential issues throughout our town. So I think we really need to stick to what's in the regulations. I think, like Daryl said, we have the authority. If there's a clear, you know, issue with the lack of vegetation after the initial inspections to confirm that there is mature growth and vegetation over that area, which is required, then we, you know, that's kind of our safety mechanism right now. But there's so many places throughout our town where people have all kinds of animals, goats, sheep, you know, horses that are eating vegetation in their yards. So I just think, you know, we need to be mindful of the fact it's everywhere. And, you know, that we need to just be concerned with performance of the system, and fixing a system is in failure is a paramount objective of the board and these regulations. And so first step, let's fix a failed system. Second step, let's make sure that it's working effectively and appropriately. And, you know, if we need to come up with amendments, Daryl, that require, you know, annual just check-ins to make sure the vegetation is maintained, that's something we can consider. But I don't think we can just, you know, start throwing these out at, you know, like willy-nilly right now when it's not part of the regulations.
So I would
Okay,
suggest.
this
we
is
move on to
Magnus.
discuss-
I have been sitting quiet here. I just want to add one thing here. And
I'm sorry,
Mr.
I was.
Berkovitz has
Hey,
a history
hold
of
on,
not letting
Magnus,
inspectors in.
Magnus, hold on. A board member was speaking. We, as a board, we really do need to deliberate on some things. So hold on just a moment, please, while Matt Beaver speaks.
I was just going to say, I suggest we discuss the specific variances requested, because that's why we're here. And I think that you know, I think the vegetation thing is important. I think we need to follow it up, but I think we should discuss the actual variances, because that's what we've been asked to do.
Yes, and just one other thing, there was that other outstanding issue of well location, and I want to, I see that, I'm assuming that this is the updated plan with the distances confirmed and the location confirmed. Is that correct, Rob? Are you on mute, Rob?
I'm sorry, I was muted. Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
And so I guess I would want to make sure the butters are in agreement on the
Sorry,
well
what did you
location
say?
now.
Yes, I am, but we did find two other anomalies on the plan that we'd like to raise.
Are these the ones that were sent to us earlier today?
No, these are my own. We discovered in looking at this more deeply that it shows the fence for the paddock as being 5 feet away from the property line, which is not accurate. The property line and the fence are exactly the same spot. So we feel that that's not accurate. Also, when I did a measurement from this little area on the fence, this where it kind of has a little square. Do you see what I'm talking about halfway through? Yes, I measured that from there down to the end of the street toward the front of the house. And I measured 70 feet. And on the plan, it measures roughly 120 feet. So there's some major kind of anomalies on this plan that I'm concerned about.
I assume the plan was done by a licensed surveyor and they've signed off on it. And an engineer who signed off on this plan.
That's correct. Joyce Asen's the licensed surveyor.
Okay, is she on any longer, or you've taken her?
Yeah, she's here.
Yes.
Okay, so
So we did a
I don't know if
field
there's
survey.
any way to address the discrepancy just raised.
Well, I'm not sure what, where they measured from or to.
Okay.
How did, because if they measure to the edge of the street, the pavement in the street from that corner of the fence, we don't show that. We're showing the edge of the layout, not the edge of the pavement. So we've done a field survey, we tied into property.
And it
line-
should be shorter, but it was actually longer than that.
We've tied into property line control. So I'm not sure, you know, what they're speaking of. This is a field survey that was done. We did, I don't know what the field crew located for the well prior to, but we met with the homeowner, and that's the existing well as it sits in front of their house at number 9.
Okay, they were just referring to this bump here.
Yeah, it's just
The
a
distance from that to the road.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But I would say, like, I guess I'm sort of at a loss, because I think we either need to say this was surveyed and that's the workflow, and then if there's a different surveyor, the property line's contested, then that needs to be done by a surveyor surveying it, not a homeowner measuring it. And
That's fine, but it also impacts our setbacks.
let me just finish. So Joyce, you guys completed the survey related to this, and from your standpoint, the property line as marked and the fence as marked are accurate, and the setbacks as it relates to the well are accurate. So then the pertinent question would be whether the 20-foot setback from that upper left corner of the plan is accurate. And again, you know, I guess for me, it's a question of, I think if property lines are disputed, we need to resolve that, because we can't have a system that goes in where we say it was 20 and not this. But I'm also concerned about, like, we have a system right now that's in failure, and to the points that were raised, like, it is not functioning properly for the family or for the environment. And so delaying is also not trivial. So if you want to contest it and say, we're going to bring a surveyor in to do this, I think that the board should still proceed with the variance hearings conditional to the setback being satisfied, and then that can be followed up, because again, if we've got meetings with 6, 7 variance hearings, we can't re-adjudicate this. We need to be able to move forward. So,
and we can certainly do that. We can make this conditional on another survey, but you'd have to have a surveyor do it. We can't have sort of an individual sort of measuring and telling us something. We need something that someone has signed off on.
Okay.
That's fine.
And that, I guess, should not be at the expense of the homeowner who has already hired a surveyor.
Correct.
So, of the applicant homeowner. So, all right. And it would have to be done in a timely manner so that if they want to get this system replaced, they can be moving ahead soon. Does that sound?
Which is fine. Can I just ask a question? Like the other anomaly that I saw, how does that get addressed?
Which anomaly, sorry?
The property line is the only anomaly that's relevant to us. So what needs to be surveyed is, this is where the property line is and it's 20 feet. Whether the bump out to the fence is at what point on the road, you're certainly welcome to survey that, but has no bearing on any of the things being considered by the board. But the property line certainly would. So if the property line were 5
This
feet,
measurement is important right here.
because that's the part that if it were 5 feet off, would require either the system to be moved 5 feet over or to require a variance.
And Mark, let's say, let's just play this out so that the applicant can know what to anticipate. Let's say a survey came back and it showed that, yes, indeed, it's 5 feet different or what have you. Would moving it 5 feet over fall within the realm of a field change or not?
It could be moved. That's correct.
Okay. Because I see that there's a test pit that's to the side here, so that to me implies that one could move it over into that area. So, okay, so that might be workable. All right, do we have any other?
I see Rebecca's hand up, but I don't know if that's old or new.
Oh, it was old, but I do have a question about, yeah, it's probably overlapping with my old question, which is, it would be really nice if we could find a space on this property, small property lot, that doesn't require a variance. And so that's the reason I was wondering if there's any possibility of evaluating another site slightly over towards the middle or something, if that doesn't require those variances at all, then we don't have to worry.
Okay, but I think we've raised that and addressed that. Okay, let me pull up the variance request letter.
And for the abutters, just to confirm, as we kind of consider the variances, it sounds like your plan will be to get a surveyor to survey the property line and confirm the setback. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I just wanted to note, I think, is it going to be part of this? There were questions sent in to us regarding depth to groundwater. And I think one explanation that might help with that is that there were different test pits across the property, and we have to look at what the shallowest depth to groundwater is when evaluating the system. So we don't look at the different sections of the system, we look at the system as a whole, because it's going to have a level bottom, essentially, if I could simplify that. So maybe that answers a question that someone had about the different depths to groundwater identified through modeling.
Yeah, and if I can, Darryl, they are designing it to be stepped according to where the groundwater was found at each depot.
Oh, they are? Oh, okay.
Yes. But they have to address the groundwater at 55 inches as well. So they have to, that's why they're stepping it.
Okay.
I think the point
I was
remains
actually
that,
wondering about that.
I think the point remains though, that simply because holes 20-1 and 20-3 were fine, we have to go by the shallowest groundwater. And so that, I think that hopefully addresses that question in the letter. Does that make sense?
I mean, they all were below 7 feet below the surface. So none of them were above 5 feet, even with the estimated with high water.
Groundwater was found at 55 inches by models in deep hole number 2.
Yeah, it's on the plan. Deep well number 2.
5 feet is 60 inches. So models are a wonderful indicator. And then we'll get to the sieve analysis here in terms of discussing the variance requests. So we'll go through each of the variances requested. And then when it comes to, assuming we approve them, when it comes to approval of the plan, that's when we may discuss some conditions. Okay, so, and Rob, is it okay with you if we proceed with each variance request?
That would be great.
Okay. Board's okay with that, I assume?
Carol, can I ask one question? I think Lisa,
Yep.
So I think there were sort of two areas where what I would say is I entirely agree that the maintenance of intact vegetation over the SAS is an important part of its performance, and think that we've got broad consensus on that. In terms of the structuring of the variances, if we were to include, I mean, I know that any community member could raise a concern if there's, like, I know we've had this with discharge of effluent and other things on other properties, can certainly raise an issue and have Mark come out and take a look. Have we had other instances where we had some periodic pattern of assessment in situations like this, or would so doing be a novel intervention?
I have to say, I'm not, just for the level of effort that it would require from the board to go out and visit and inspect systems. I hope people have the performance of their system in mind themselves. And also, I think if there are any problems potentially caused by breakout at a neighbor's system or something else, or erosion noted, they could certainly let us know. And if they can see it from their property, then the Board of Health could come out and take a look as well if the homeowner of the owner of the system was not inviting us out. So there would be other ways to do it. I don't know about introducing some sort of periodic inspection program is going to work that well for us logistically.
Totally fine. And then my apologies, I missed Sweet Meadow's hand up. And just to make sure that we've addressed every hand up in the hearing.
Mhm.
Is it okay if we acknowledge Sweet Meadow if you're still
Yes.
hand raised?
Okay.
Yes. I grew up on 1 acre of land in Sherborn with 4 horses and goats and even a wallaby. And we have had a septic, and we had the horses turned out above our septic, and we just rotated them, and we always had grass on it. So it was never a problem with 4 horses, and we even had a couple mini horses too. So it's very possible for 1 acre to keep vegetation and have a septic. We still have the septic to this day. Well, my mom does, and there's grass always on top of it, even though the horses walked on top of it and ate, and we played football on top of it with 5 kids. So I don't think it would be difficult to keep vegetation on 1 acre, but that'd be helpful.
Thanks for your input.
Thanks, Julie.
Yep.
And then Nathan, I think last time you said you could grow grass on a bowling ball. I hope that we've expressed our enthusiasm and emphasis in terms of, from the board standpoint, how important it will be to maintain vegetation over this space. But also just want to kind of say that explicitly in terms of, as we think about the variances, I know that you know how important that is to us, but just want to take a moment to emphasize, it may not be a bowling ball, but we hope grass stays robustly performing there.
The answer is I will do my best, and you're welcome to come by here anytime and see the property.
Okay. And I'll just note that probably some of the concern arose from, as we were discussing that, there was also a photo up of the area, and it did not have grass on it. So that may have prompted some of the concern, and I don't know if there was something special going on at the time of whenever that photograph may have been taken.
I'd like to suggest that photo might have been taken in maybe late February, early March, where, grass is just not growing, okay? I keep bags of grass seed here. We're constantly overseeding, aerating, properly fertilizing with organic fertilizer. I mean, we care about this property. It's a 4th farm I built. I have a family here. I have animals here. I have chickens. I have ducks. Okay. This is not just, a commercial operation. I think if you look at the Sherborn rules and regs, I could have a couple of cows here. As long as it's not for commercial purposes, it's within our, that's why we live here. It's an agricultural community. There's I think over 100 horses within a mile of our home, between Coursebrook and Greens Farm and Whitney and Jenkins and a couple of others here and there. This is what we do here, and we love it, okay? So let's just move on. Let us properly prepare our home for our family, and let us live here and enjoy it safely, and with the Board of Health and the state guidelines and Mark and GLM's guidance, and obviously the Board of Health. Thank you very much.
I just would like to make a note that when Nathan built the farm, one of the things he told us when he built the whole paddock and the barn, he was going to have beautiful grass growing everywhere. Beautiful grass has never grown in the paddock, and the horses never are turned out on the grass areas of his house. Maybe he will start doing that now, and I hope he will, because I want this system to operate effectively. And I do plan, if I do see that things are not operating effectively, I will be inviting the Board of Health in to inspect it regularly, because I know Nathan has a history of not letting people inspect his property for different situations. So I just want to mention that we are.
All right.
So I think before we go into talking about what's happened in the past,
Yes.
because we aren't here to adjudicate that, and we aren't here to adjudicate whether grass has been growing previously. I think all we can say is that we will require mature vegetation over this field.
Yep.
And if after the field is put in, there will be a conditional approval, because the grass doesn't grow immediately. But once it does, we're going to need it to continue being there, and that's all we can do. We're not here to sort of go over the entire history of the property. So should we move on to variances?
Yep. All right. So do we have a motion to grant a variance section 8.02, which has to deal with the groundwater level being less than 5 feet below natural surface grade?
Seconded.
Okay. Any further discussion?
No.
Okay. Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca, nay.
Matt Vitale, aye.
All right, and then the companion piece, which has to do with, oh, actually, this is a little different. Do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 8.01? And this is looking to install 2 feet above seasonal high groundwater with, which is part of Mass DEP's innovative alternative approvals program for the Elgin system, which is permitted to have the 2-foot separation.
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other comments? And Mark, would you like to
haven't
just confirm that?
We just haven't properly evaluated if there are other locations that would not require variances, and I think that would be better for the town as a whole.
Rebecca,
I think that's our responsibility as a board.
Rebecca, we've talked about it on 3 separate occasions on 2
Yeah.
separate hearings. And so I think
I know.
you totally can vote nay on it.
Yeah.
And Mark, could you just confirm that that 2-foot is part of the Mass DEP approvals process?
Yes, Daryl, that is correct. So they're using Elgin system, as it says in the waiver request, and they are allowed to design it within two feet of groundwater, which they are doing. And that's one of the benefits of having additional resources built into the septic system.
Okay. All right. So any further comments? All right. Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca, nay.
Vitale, aye.
Okay. And then we have, do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 5.1D, which has to do with a sieve analysis performed as an alternative to a percolation test? And Mark, could you just address that briefly?
Sure. And just so you know, we were out on Coursebrook 2 days in a row. I was actually down at 7 Coursebrook, I believe, or 11 Coursebrook the day before. The soils back in November when we did the soil testing were damp. That's why we see groundwater elevations at 55 inches in some areas. And when you have moist soils, the percolation test cannot be performed properly. The state does allow an alternative to doing percolation tests, and that is to send the soils to the lab. It's more conservative than doing the soil testing out in the field. So, and that was what they did because of the moist soil the day we were out there.
Okay, so any other comments from or questions from the board? Nope. Okay, so Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, nay.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, and then we have a local upgrade approval that is needed. Okay. So do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 15.4051I? And that again relates to the sieve analysis. And Mark, could you just note, is the state rationale and procedure just the same as Sherborn's?
Yes, it is. I was going to say I would be repeating myself from the last statement I made. It is true,
Okay.
what you just said.
Okay, any other comments from the board? Okay, Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, nay.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, so we can close the hearing. And now in terms of,
Daryl,
yes?
and we want to make it conditional on the satisfaction of the 20-foot setback. Is that correct?
That'll be the next.
Oh, for the plans. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, for the plan approval. So, oh, sorry, Ellen, were you saying something else?
Nope, that's it.
Okay,
From GLM Engineering, may I make a comment on the 20-foot setback?
yes.
So when we do surveying, as a surveyor, I am bound by certain requirements and regulations as to where property lines are and how I establish them. And if there's a dispute between neighbors as to where property lines are, that's a private thing. I'm certifying where property lines are when we sign as-built and, or as I sign this plan and certify that where this property line is. Again, it's not, if there's a dispute, it's between neighbors, and I am basically ensuring that the property line setback is as required.
Okay, this is when I wish we had a lawyer on the board, but so Mark, are you, Mark or anyone else have
I'm here.
comments
Yes.
about how to handle this then in terms of,
What I would recommend is this, is that the board can approve this conditional to one, they have to, so I don't forget, they have to do a deed recording for the garbage grinder. So that's going to take a couple days. And I believe there's an appeal process, so I would check that out. And if there, from the hearing, it sounds like there may not be an appeal process, but I can recommend approval of the plan conditional to a deed recording, and then the plans can lay on the table for 30 days in case there's an appeal. And again, if a lawyer says, no, it's 45 days, so be it. I don't have it in front of me, but I believe the standard usually is 30 days if there's discussion at a hearing, as we've had.
Yeah, I guess my understanding is that a surveyor has basically put their license on the line to say that this is where the property line is, and that the septic will be built 20 feet from the property line. I think if they go to build it and there's dispute about whether it's 70 feet from the property line, then that's something that has to be addressed at that point. But I guess I have a hard time sort of just saying that a surveyor is, making something up here.
Right.
I'm
And
a
yet the
licensed
well
professional
is in a
also.
completely
I'm
incorrect
still
position.
speaking. I'm sorry, I'm still speaking. I'm a licensed professional also, and I take that seriously. And so I guess, I would want to understand what the process is, but I am hesitant to sort of question someone's, survey. I think if there was a dispute between surveyors, then that might be an issue, but I think we may need to clearly delineate what is allowed and what sort of timeline that is allowed on.
Yeah, and Matt, I'm not disagreeing with you on that. I agree with you 100%. We have a credentialed professional land surveyor that signed and stamped this plan, so it goes as it is. I was just saying the possibility is if it ever did get challenged, well, then that would have to happen at a different point. It doesn't in any way underestimate what we have on this plan right now.
I agree with you, Mark. I was just more commenting about, I think as the board thinks about what we make this conditional on, I think we need to think about that.
right, I'm not sure whether that,
So what we're
if
approving,
there is a dispute, if it gets resolved within our board or outside of our board and then comes back to us depending on the outcome of it. I don't
well,
know.
I guess we're approving the plan. On the plan, the reference point is the property line, and it's 20 feet from that. So as we approve that, we're approving the installation of a system 20 feet from the property line.
Right.
And so I think that then goes to Mark in the field in terms of, as we kind of do the routine follow-ups, I don't think we typically routinely confirm this is where the property line is, this is those pieces.
Right.
And we're sort of doing the technical piece. And so I think that for adjudicating where the property line is, it sounds like we feel like that's out of scope for the board. And the plan we're approving is referencing a property line and the location relative to that, which is what we're approving, as opposed to approving this specific GPS coordinate is where the property line is.
I'd agree.
Right.
I think we can approve the plan saying that it's 20 feet from the property line. And if there is argument about whether that property line is accurate on the plan, I think that needs to be dealt with elsewhere.
And maybe we can check with town council that whether if an abutter or somebody else does a survey that comes up with different information, I don't know that the Board of Health has the expertise to then evaluate between those two. Kind of seems like that would have to go somewhere else for resolution and then come back to us to influence the change in the
If I can make a suggestion.
field work field changes that might be necessary. Yes, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah. If I could make a quick suggestion, we just might be able to put this to rest. We can just slide the system over 3 feet and make it 20 feet from the fence. the test pits are there. We can do it as a marking. You can condition your approval to move the system over so it's 20 feet from the fence line. We don't have an issue with that. It's not going to move very much. It's only about 3 feet. And if Mark's okay with it, we can just reflect that on the as-built plan.
And we're okay with that? Thank you very much.
Can we make it 5 feet and we have a deal?
From the 20 feet from the fence.
We're just going to go 20 feet from the fence.
From the horse fence? Is
Correct.
that what you're saying?
Yep.
Then I'm fine with that. Are you okay with that?
And I think Rebecca had her hand up too, but I don't know. Are you good, Rebecca?
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, because if we approve something 20 feet from the property line and the determination of where the property line is, as long as nothing changes, then it should still stand.
Correct.
All right, I'd like to say, Rob, good idea. Thank you. And also thank you to the homeowner for being willing to make that accommodation. Thanks. Okay.
And Daryl, just on that note, will we still be okay to any other existing wells, Rob or Joyce?
Yes, yeah, we're fine with that, Mark. We're going
Okay.
parallel. Because he's 141 feet, he only needs to be 125. We'll get a little closer to the homeowner as well.
Will it, how much
A little
closer will it be to the homeowner as well?
Yeah, we'll probably get another foot or two closer.
But they'll still satisfy the setback.
Oh, here, let me bring that up, because I think it was sort of an arc that it might not be.
Yeah, you had 141 feet, so that wouldn't make a difference. You need 125 in this type soil.
Yeah,
So
we're not. We'd have to move
And
it.
it'll get farther from the abutter.
It'll be farther from the abutter as well. And then we'll put it 20 feet from the fence. I believe it's about a 3, maybe a 3.5 foot move, and we'll reflect it on the as-built.
yeah, that makes sense. The board could vote on it that way because you're not voting on this exact plan anymore. You're voting on the system being shifted to be 20 feet from the fence. You can make that in your motion if you so wish.
Okay, all right. So how about, do we have a motion to approve the plans as presented with the exception of the setback to the system being 20 feet from the fence, existing fence?
Excuse me, if I may say
Oh,
something.
yep.
Okay, the fence, okay, is a wooden split rail fence. Wooden split rail fences do rot out, need to be replaced. And I want to make sure that we're not putting ourselves or future homeowners into a corner here. I think we should maintain the property line as kind of the goal line, if you will. And if
Okay.
we move the 20 feet, move it from the property line, not a fence line. Okay, because a fence line, again, a lot of our fences post and rail.
Yep. No, point taken. Yeah.
I agree. That's a good point.
Simple electric fence, okay,
Yes.
which is very mobile. Okay, we move it all the time.
Nathan,
Okay,
would you be fine with 25 feet from the property line?
done.
Perfect.
All right.
Ann and Magnus, does that work for you?
That's fine with us.
Yes, the property line is shown in the plan. Yes.
Perfect. So we'll do 25 feet from the property line, and then Mark, you'll approve it with the as-built.
That is correct, and that could be part of your motion. And I agree with the homeowner. That is true. A fence can move, so the
Yeah.
property line's a more exact point. So I agree with the homeowner. And the other thing is, we got to remember, if it does get approved, to include the requirement for a deed recording on the garbage disposal.
And also the DEP notice of alternative
I may
system.
jump in. We do not have a garbage disposal. We
Yeah,
never.
no, it's true, Nathan.
You can't have one.
It's about the future.
We have chickens. We don't need one.
That's
Right,
fine.
so it's just saying in the future, you can't have one.
Okay, we don't want one. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that we're not saying you have one. We're just saying that you need to do a deed recording, as everyone else has. Okay. And Ellen was right. And the IA, Innovative Alternative Technology, has to be recorded as well.
Okay. So do we have a motion to approve the plan conditional to receipt of deed recordings for the garbage grinder, for the IA technology, and to the system being shifted so that its closest corner will be 25 feet from the property line.
So moved.
Is this also conditional to receipt of the second revision fee?
Yes. And yes. Thank you, Ellen. Okay, so 4 conditions. Okay, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? No. Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
I'm really not quite sure about the procedure. Since I had, because I do agree that I think this is a good compromise, but I don't agree with the overall lack of assessment. So just.
You're not agreeing with the variances, you're just agreeing with the plan.
Yeah.
But the variances are on the plan.
Right. So I guess I have to say nay. I have to. Be consistent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments at this point? And thank you everyone for the ideas and the brainstorming on the fly. And I think we're in a good place, perhaps.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks. Okay. Get back to the agenda. Okay, 8:10. Oh goodness. All right. So 92 Lake Street. I don't know, Dan or Mark, who would like to introduce this?
I can run through it.
Okay. And
I
is
won't
there
be able to
anything in
get you
particular?
back on schedule, but I can try to go through it pretty quickly.
Okay. Is there anything in particular you want me to open up, or do you want to take the screen and open things up as you like? Either way.
Well,
Septic plan, perhaps?
no, we don't have a septic plan. All we have is the letter that
Oh,
we
the old
sent you.
approval. Yeah.
I think I added the whole septic plan on. If
The
you
original
wanted
septic
to.
plan.
Yeah. But that's not useful. The building application?
I think you're really, Dan, I think the essence of your point is for a typical pattern of DEP guidance application, it says C plan. And in this case, it doesn't say C plan, but it's written on the plan.
Right.
And so it sort of boils down to that question.
Could I just mention that what Dan is referring to as the permit is not the permit, that's actually the application. And that the permit that this board provides is the approved stamped plan. That's the permit.
Okay. Okay, but is there anything I need to open up on the screen, or Dan, you can just speak either way?
I'll just run it through you. So the homeowners at 92 Lake are looking to modify their second floor. They have an existing sitting room up there. They'd like to wall that in and create a 5th room on the second floor, which would be the 5th bedroom of the home. We were retained to take a look at upgrading the existing system. We did go out and do some soil testing with Mark, but as we got into the details of it and we looked at the existing system, we see that it is so over-designed based on what they did in 1993 that it really didn't make a whole lot of sense for us to tear that out and put in something that would actually be a little bit smaller under the current code. We also see that it recently passed the Title V inspection in 2019. It looks good. Our soil testing confirmed what they had for soils and groundwater. And as I said, the capacity of the existing system is 900 gallons a day, and we're looking for 550. Even under the current code, if we did a back calculation of what's under the current code, it would be good for 8 bedrooms or 6 bedrooms with a garbage grinder. That's how over-designed this is. So we'd like to get the board's opinion on whether we could, do an upgrade of this system consisting of upgrading the tank size to meet a 5-bedroom requirement, but keep the existing leaching field because it is in good condition and it is capable of handling the 5 bedrooms, more than capable of handling the 5 bedrooms. So that's in a nutshell, that's our request.
Dan, can I ask a question, Dale? Is that okay?
Yes.
I'm not sure if this is a Dan question or Mark question, but in terms of systems of this vintage, is this a scenario where there's no variance because, it was sort of peri-Title V and there weren't Title V issues to get variances for, or because this plan was approved in 93, it was all under Title V but didn't require variance, or did it require variance?
I can help with that, Dan, if you want.
Sure.
This system was built for new construction, so they could not receive any waivers from our local code or the state code. So this was built without any waivers for new construction back in 1993.
Okay, perfect. And so I guess, and then Dan, when the system was built, it had a design flow that supported a garbage grinder. Is that right?
It had actually 2 things that increased the capacity. One, it was designed for 150 gallons per day per bedroom, and they put the garbage grinder on top of that.
Okay.
Right, the regulations were different then. There were no exceptions for garbage grinders without, I think only in connection with replacement systems only previously, so.
Yeah, that's correct. This was built for a garbage grinder.
Right, but Mark, do we have any precedent for what the request is now?
The only one I mentioned it to Dan, we had an engineer that came in for another system built in that 1980s up to 1995 era I think it was 30 Augusto, and the engineer had to submit details on the actual design flow. Dan and I went over those numbers today, and he could even show it as a class 3 soil and still have 706 gallons, which would still be over the requested 5 bedrooms without a garbage grinder. So we have had situations, and then we stopped doing that for a while. So this, whatever we do tonight, and I explained it to Dan, would be setting another precedent to where we're going. But indeed, Ellen noted it too. The permit is the plan. So that in all respects helps a little bit in the last section of this guidance you're looking at here, Daryl, and that Dan highlighted out in his presentation, his letter. So with that said, indeed, it does have the capacity in the leaching area, but not with the septic tank. And the septic tank would need to be upgraded if the board allows the leaching field to handle, it can handle the 5 bedrooms. It's actually, the only issue here, it's 27 years old, but it, as Dan said, it had a recent Title V as well. So that helps to clear that picture on its function.
Mark, can I just ask, so I just want to make sure I understand the question. So it sounds like both Mr. McIntyre and the board would agree that the flow as we understand it is about 900 gallons per day. And it's really a question of having an upgraded tank, but there's no dispute about the design flow of the system.
Yeah, I would say the 900 was an older factor. We wouldn't use that factor if we're looking at the new design flows under the new Title V, which came out in 1995. If it's a class 2 soil, which it appeared to be, it would handle up to 1,050 gallons per day with my calculations. Dan's going to need to do those. If it was a class 3 soil, which means it's a little tighter, it could handle up to 706 gallons per day. So indeed, the 900 was the standard that was being looked at back in 1993. under the old review standards, under the different Title V and local codes, but under today's standards, it's still over the requested 550 without a garbage grinder.
Perfect. Thanks, Mark.
So I was having trouble whether I was just missing it, but I wasn't seeing the number of bedrooms specified on the plan. Was it on there? If I bring the plan up again?
I
For
think
the
it was
original?
on there.
Yes, it is.
Wasn't it on the plan as 4 bedrooms?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I was just I don't know why I kept missing wherever that might have been on the plan. So do you remember what part of this was on there?
In the lower left-hand corner,
Oh, lower left.
the in that writing,
Oh, okay.
Darryl, you can also go to the notice Dan sent out. He squiggled, drew some lines around the area, and it will show the 4 bedrooms.
yeah, line 7, where they have the total daily flow 75 gallons per day times 2 times 4 bedroom.
Oh, there it is. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so that makes it.
But it's more than just saying 4 bedrooms. They actually go out and spell out what the design flow is.
Right.
So it does fit into that kind of that last example that is in that DEP letter, where it refers to see the plan, and the plan actually spells out the design flow. It doesn't just say 4 bedrooms. It actually says 900 gallons per day.
Yeah, it does say that, but doesn't it say here that, too bad? It said 3 bedrooms.
Oh, no, we would.
Even though it was designed for 660, are you interpreting that differently than I am?
No, I think I interpret that is slightly different. That will be where the theoretical capacity under the loading, but this actually doesn't give a theoretical capacity. It gives the actual flow rate. Is that
Okay.
Am I understanding that correctly?
I guess I was referring to the one right above that, the paragraph above that, where the plan references 3 bedrooms, but specifically provides for a design flow of 660. Ours says 4 bedrooms and specifically provides for a design flow of 900.
Yeah.
So I think this falls under the situation where we can't like back calculate a design flow based on the old rules, but if we're given a design flow, we can work with it. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's exactly right.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sorry. When you mentioned the last one, I was trying to figure out what in there was appropriate. Okay.
And so I guess my other thought for this is, in this case, that applies, and I guess for the slippery slope question of, you sort of don't want people to say like, I've got a 3-bedroom house with a 1,200 gallon per day design flow, and then we approve and we switch. I guess in this case, I'm also reassured by the fact that the original application required no variances as well. Like, this is not likely to be a situation that results in a backdoor upgrade because there are no variances granted. We're sort of like the increasing the capacity of the septic tank in this case is not something that would have driven a different pattern of installation in general. It's sort of saying, we've got, like, we're not changing the leach field, and to Dan's point, to put a leach field in for this, it would be smaller. And that doesn't make a lot of sense to spend money to put in a smaller leach field for one that's past Title V and is larger. How comfortable are people with the septic tank replacement part of it? From a sort of slippery slope standpoint, I think that for me, but partly because it had no variances, and I don't know if that's valid.
I think that sounds like a good idea. A question I have is, we don't want this to be misinterpreted as a precedent. So what else would we build in that defines the specifics of this situation well enough in our decision so that it doesn't get translated inappropriately in the future? And I don't know if this would also use up the +1 or because there were never variances required that this would not use up the +1.
If, Matt, go ahead if you were going, I'm sorry.
My 2 cents is I don't think it should use the +1 because it's not a failed system. Like I think they've got a system that's in compliance and been in compliance. I think they're saying, you know, does this rule apply? And it seems to, with the caveat that there's that piece with the septic tank. So for me, I don't think it uses the +1, but that's one person's 2 cents for what it's worth.
I'd agree with that as well, for the same reasons stated.
And on the other, we have had other people looking at increasing bedroom count, but they received waivers. So I think that's a very important factor to note here. The other thing too is Dan did go out and he did soil evaluation under the new 1995 code. So that's what we did in a previous situation too, because when this was put in, the soil testing was done when we did not do soil evaluation. So we really, have to confirm groundwater, especially groundwater with the new methods. Percolation tests really haven't changed in the way we do them. In fact, they're not as restrictive as they were in the early 90s. So, but that's another important factor is that the soil be evaluated because it wasn't when they put this in. And again, this was new construction with no waivers. But back then, I don't believe this has a 2-compartment tank because I don't believe we required them back then. But now again, I can't remember. Dan, does it have a 2-compartment tank or not?
No, it doesn't. We'd upgrade it to a 2-compartment tank.
Yeah. So and that's another new regulation. But I'm thinking of a few other people that have tried to get additional bedrooms with existing flow, but they, and if I can remember right, had waivers or it was that additional flow from the garbage grinder requirement. So we want to make sure that they don't come back saying, well, you did it for this case. This case is different. This wasn't.
I think the fact that there are no variances is a really key piece to it.
Yeah, I agree.
And also some of the previous examples, haven't we kind of just estimated and back calculated the flow versus it being explicitly articulated?
No, I think we've never done that. I think what we've more typically done is added the garbage grinder restriction. So we've had a couple ones that we keep that in, but I think the DEP letter said you can't back calculate it and say like, we've got 75 feet of this trench, it would calculate as this. There've been a bunch of times that that's been tried, but I think usually we say no to that piece.
No, right. That's what I'm saying. Like, this I'm saying this is not that situation.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, I think the state confirmed that too. We had one at 21 Morse Road that they couldn't back calculate.
Okay, so, all right, so there's some special circumstances here. Mark, were you recommending some sort of groundwater, depth to groundwater confirmation?
Well, Dan's done that. He did a soil evaluation, so that would have to be submitted with his letter of request showing the calculations under today's standards and the groundwater determined. There's ledge out there, so groundwater was very difficult to determine. In fact, where we tested was the edges, so we wouldn't destroy the system. And the system could really only go in the same place it's in. So again, I think this would be a decision that's appropriate for the conditions that are out there. Again, I do know we don't want to set a precedent that others will come in and say, well, you just did it for that one. I think this has its own set of circumstances. If it was uncomfortable, the board could say, have it tested on a regular basis if you so wish, or have the wall removed when they sell. I mean, if you wanted to go that direction, but I think this follows pretty much the same format we've followed for some other systems built to overcapacity in the 1980s and early 90s.
So those key features are soil testing with validation of existing calculation, but not back calculation, confirming depth to groundwater, and an initial plan that you're building off of that required no local or state variances.
That's correct.
Yeah, I feel like there's one other, but now I can't think of it.
Well, the septic tank has to be updated.
The tank upgrade is another.
And Mark and Dan, from a technical standpoint, independent of this project, we would say that a dual chamber tank in general is a superior performance to a single chamber tank. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, and I agree.
And so in this case, we are upgrading the tank, which is also a larger size, but I think that's another key element, is that from a performance standard, if somebody wanted to replace their tank with a 2-chamber, that would be allowed, and certainly reasonable to size it appropriately for the design flow of the system.
Yes, so right. I would like to see that as part of our decision, that that is an important factor in this.
Because I think in this case, you'd say the homeowner is improving the performance of the system, which is the part we're supportive of. If for a lateral move, that could also be a different circumstance.
Right, because it's it's reclassifying it, but you're getting another bonus in there of bringing it closer to current standards. As Mark pointed out, the system was built under a different set of regulations. But okay, is there anything else that we could define for this? I think we've captured it. Yeah, I can't think of anything else besides those 4 points. Anybody? And Ellen, did you capture those so we don't have to repeat them again for a motion?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, good. Oh, do we need a garbage grinder deed restriction, or that's not necessary?
No,
I
we
would
wouldn't need
suggest
that.
it, Darryl. Oh, go ahead, Dan. I'm sorry.
If we keep the existing system, it would be capable of handling the 5 bedrooms plus the garbage grinder, so we wouldn't need that.
The only thing, no, Dan, I would suggest it only because of the age of the system.
Yeah, just to not.
Okay.
Do you think that they would be agreeable to that if we?
I'll talk them into it.
Okay.
Yes, they would be.
I would echo that I'm enthusiastic about that restriction. Because I think that also demonstrates there's some piece of load you're removing from the system if they do have a garbage grinder, which is appealing.
For them, I think Dan will be able to convince them that it'll extend the life of their system, frankly.
Yes.
Sounds good. I know we're running late on time. Do we want to?
Okay, good. So with all of those conditions, do we have a motion to authorize Mark to approve the building application?
Darryl, they're going to need to come in and apply for the septic tank first, and I'll bring that back to the board for approval.
Oh,
So,
okay.
But you can make, I mean, if you want to set the condition, obviously I can't approve the building permit till the septic tank goes in at the same time, and that's got to go back to the board for review and approval.
Oh, okay.
And I'll bring in.
So Ellen,
Dan's
save all
calculator.
these notes and we will refer to them when we make our motion the next time around.
Yeah.
Okay, but I think you've got a sense of the board now, Dan. So.
Okay, that's great. That's what we were looking for. I appreciate it.
Do you want to vote agreement though? Did you agree to all these things? Or you don't think you need to? No.
I would say, I think it's
just, it's easier to track to make sure everybody is in agreement.
perfect.
Okay.
Good.
All right. So do we have a motion to express agreement with the approval subject to the conditions noted?
Could you go over them? Sort of in keeping with what Ellen was just saying.
And it, well,
Just
the
list them.
Conditional to a garbage grinder deed recording. The septic tank will be a plan will be submitted to replace the existing septic tank with a 2,000 gallon. Was it 2,000 or 2,500 gallon?
It'll be 2,000, I believe. Is that correct,
I
Dan?
think it's gonna be a 2,000.
Yeah, okay. With a 2,000-gallon septic tank, Dan will submit his calculations and soil evaluation that has been conducted.
Deed recording on the garbage
I
grinder.
got that. Yep, that was the first one. I think that was it.
There was something else.
Dan's planning to submit his calculations on the new design loads in the new Title V. I don't know if you said that. Okay.
Yeah, I have that. So those were the three that I had.
Okay, could have sworn we had at least.
Well, it was to be noted that there were no waivers.
Right, it was,
for this new plan.
it was originally new construction and no waivers are required.
Yeah.
But that's not a condition. You know, that's
Conditions of the property that would move us to approve or prompt us.
Right, but that's not what we need. I mean,
Oh,
that's
okay.
That's in our files. You know,
Okay, then let's term this though approval to proceed with this because of all these factors. Maybe we should call them factors rather than conditions.
Okay.
And then also it's a 2,000-gallon 2-compartment tank.
Oh, yeah.
And a Title V inspection was done was another one, I think.
Yes. Yeah. And Dan's going to submit his Form 11 for
Yeah.
Form 11, Form 12 for the soil testing.
Soil evaluation, yeah.
Okay. Okay, would someone like to move the approval of concept or whatever it is that we're calling this, or come up with what we call it?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Babatai, aye.
Okay, and right on time for our 8:30. Are we done, Matt? I mean, Dan?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Take care.
Okay, 115 Maple Street. Apologies for the late start of your appointment.
So Darryl, the owner's here, I believe. I don't know if his architect is here as well.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, hi, both of you. The proposal came in for taking one of the bedrooms on. First of all, they have a fairly new system. It was put in septic system. It was put in 2016 and received a certificate of compliance for a 4-bedroom. And their opportunity that they're hoping to have the board review is to take one of the bedrooms on the second floor, converting that space into a master bedroom, and then adding like an in-law suite. I don't know if you want to call it that, or an accessory unit. So what it comes down to, we saw one of these just recently where now we're dealing with double kitchen waste. And this, I believe, was approved without a garbage grinder. So the bedroom count doesn't change. It's the strength of the sewage may change to some degree, because they have 4 rooms on the first floor when their new concept is complete, without the accessory unit, 3 rooms on the second floor. There's no finished basement rooms. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes.
Okay, and with that said, this would be the new kitchenette would be the 8th room, and the new bedroom would be the 9th room. And bedroom wise, you would have a total of 4 bedrooms by definition, of full bathrooms within rooms or above the first floor. But they're here too, so I don't want to take the whole show away from them. They spent some time doing these designs, so, but that's pretty much a summary.
Okay, so I just want to go over it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rooms on the first floor proposed, and then 1, 2, 3 on the second. And with one of the first floor being a bedroom. So 4 bedrooms, agree with that. And if the basement, right, I couldn't tell if it was finished or not. So if it's unfinished and shall remain unfinished, then we don't need to include that.
What I was going to recommend, Daryl, is two things. One, a passing Title V inspection. We just did this down on South Main Street last meeting.
Yeah.
And the other thing I was going to recommend is no garbage grinders. Not recommend, require. Well, it's up to the board. It's your choice.
Okay. And I'll note that, one, these plans were very nice and easy to follow. So appreciate that. And also when we look at housing, we always have to look at, and it seems like you understand that just based on what you wrote in, that we're looking at the structure. We don't look at how people are going to specifically use spaces necessarily. We have to look at the future possibilities of other owners and how they would use it and whether the system is sized properly. So I don't know if anyone else on the board has questions. Feel free to jump in, but it looks okay to me right now. And I do like your idea of no garbage grinder.
Yeah,
Because
and
that's
Daryl,
good
just so
for
you
the
know,
system in general.
yeah, the certificate of compliance, it's attached to this, was signed for no garbage grinder. So it was designed without one. So I'm just concerned the new kitchen, well, we'd have to make sure the old kitchen doesn't have one and make sure the new kitchen doesn't have one as well.
Yeah.
We don't have a garbage grinder in our old kitchen. So we also don't have plan to install in a new kitchen either.
Okay, so what happens is when you have undigested material going into your septic tank, it behaves differently, tends to float. It could float out and get into your leaching field and clog it up. So it would actually reduce the life of your system if you did have a garbage grinder. So it's good overall. And
yeah.
Yep, we understand that, and like Gavin said, we're not planning on installing garbage grinder anyway.
I think this looks good and straightforward, and I want to second
Yeah.
appreciating great plans and a well sort of articulated request. This is fine with me.
Okay, does anyone else need any further deliberation before we authorize Mark to approve the building application?
I just wanted to mention that we submitted this as part of the preliminary building review.
Oh, okay. So we're
we
not up to
anticipate
that.
we anticipate that we're going to have a more official review after we develop the design further.
That is correct. Indeed, it's a preliminary building request, which helps to save the applicant some time and effort before they get to the final plans, but they would have to be what we're seeing today, just to be aware of, if the board approves this today, this is what you have to keep with no garbage grinders in either kitchen. If the board does require a Title V inspection, that would also need to be done just to make sure the system's working properly. But the plans that you're showing couldn't vary too much at all because it's being approved by the board.
Although if they wanted to vary it, then we just start again.
That's correct, Daryl. Yes, it's not that strict. You can come back to the board.
Yeah, but I think if we can approve it now, it'll save time later, right, of revisiting it all. So if the board's agreeable, I'd like to ask if anyone would like a motion, make a motion to authorize Mark to approve the plans or the building application if it comes in with the features as described here, and also subject to receipt of a deed recording for the garbage grinder. And
I think, Daryl, I think they already have that deed recording, yeah, from 2016. But what, if I could just add, but I thought you were going right where I was hoping you would, is upon receipt of a Title V passing inspection.
Yes.
And the reason I say that, the last one we did, there was some confusion on the Title V inspection being done after approval. And I hope that's made very clear here as well as you did in the last one.
Okay, so ignore that garbage grinder comment and instead put in the Title V. Receipt of the inspection prior to moving ahead with building.
A passing Title V.
Passing.
Understood. Thank you.
All right. Anyone on the board want to make that motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay. Any other discussion? Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay. Do the applicants have any other, future applicants have any other questions?
Yes, just to clarify, for the Title V inspection, that inspection certificate would go with the building permit application, correct?
If I can
Or are we
help,
coming back to the Board of Health?
I believe the board will the last time we did this was just the last meeting, and the board will let me review that. And as long as it's a passing Title V inspection, I can proceed. So I believe, is that correct, Daryl?
Yes.
All the board members? Yep.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I also have a question. So my name is Winston. I'm the project director along with Leo, the senior architect and the design director. And then we're looking ahead forward because previously we spoke with the building inspector about future works as if we were to start construction. And the question is that we know our property is far away enough from the wetland so that we still need to have some sort of approval from the conservation board.
Yes, you should check with them because they will confirm whether the project falls within their jurisdiction or not. And that if it's not, that's a much shorter process, but
Understood.
You should check with them.
Okay, so would that be like some sort of a open discussion like this one, or would it just be over the email or over the phone, that type of thing?
I believe you should contact their office and they will be able to provide you with either the forms that they need. Sometimes it's a site visit. I don't know exactly. They do it different ways depending on what the project is and what they know about the property already.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Daryl. If I can too, I know you're expanding past your foundation, so you're going to need to sign what we call a negative impact form, that there's no interference with the septic. We know that already. You showed that on the plan, but the well, I forgot about the well. You have to make sure you're 10 feet from the well from this new projection from the house, this new addition. So you can contact us for the original septic plan. It should have the well on it.
We will follow up on that. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Certainly, if you think of any other questions, just contact the Board of Health office or send an email, call. Okay.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, oops.
176. Oh, that's an old agenda there.
Is it?
That's an old agenda. That's not the final.
Oh, okay, good. I was wondering, that's just what I was looking for was 176. All right, so let me pull up that information. It was this one that had the best. All right. Okay.
And I'm on the call.
Oh, excellent. I was just hoping that you would pop in. So, well, maybe, why don't you explain very briefly what you want to do? I'll try and point out on the diagram as you explain it, and then, you know, a couple of minutes, and then explain to the rest of the board what the issue is that we're confronting of something that's a non-conformance with current regulations, but it's an existing non-conformance, and we need to decide if a further non-conformance fits in with that grandfathered situation. So, okay, go ahead, Seth, and I'll move my cursor around as you speak.
Okay, so right now the house is a Cape house attached to a 2-car garage with a mudroom in the between. And we wanted to add a screen porch to the building. And we thought that one of the most effective ways to do that without having to modify the existing layout of the first floor would be to add a porch effectively onto the back of the garage and the mudroom. So the mudroom would be altered to have bigger doors so that you kind of have that indoor-outdoor transition. And then the screen porch would have a slab on grade foundation and, screen porch and a roof on top of it. And the problem is that the location of the foundation that we'd like to put is less than 10 feet from the well. And if we moved all the way to 10 feet, it would make that hallway really narrow and it would be a kind of awkward, an awkward passageway. It wouldn't have that feel of being part of the house. Kind of would feel like you're going into a different building. So the existing well is just right outside of the kitchen. It's in between next to the bulkhead and the foundation of the house there. There's a small window well that I measured approximately 5 feet and 6.5 inches, and then the bulkhead is 5 feet 8.25 inches. And so basically we're wondering, do I need a variance? And if I do, then would that be something that would be possible? If I don't need a variance because we're grandfathered in, which point of the house would be considered the closest? Would the window well count as the closest? Would that be a projection of the house, or would it be the distance from the foundation of either the bulkhead or the house, whichever was closer?
Okay, so it looks like the closest, ignoring this, which would be the new situation, the closest is either from the house, and we'd probably be measuring to the edge of the well. Mark, would it be to the edge of the well casing versus the midpoint?
Yeah, it would be the exterior of the well casing to the new addition.
Okay.
Okay, these measurements are all approximate to the center of the well.
Yeah.
Just the assumption I
Okay.
made.
And then did you happen to take a measurement from the window well to the well?
Yes, that's down on the
water well?
bottom. I annotated in the bottom left-hand corner there, 4 foot 6
okay.
inches.
All right. So the thing that we can look at is, as Seth mentioned, is you look at the distance of the well. Right now, the requirement is to be at least 10 feet from the house or any projections thereof. Is that the actual wording, Mark?
That is correct. That's in our well regulation section 6-E, E as in Edward. And it's there, it was there before I started. It's been there for a long time. And I believe if you think about how big those well rigs are that have to re-drill wells sometimes and drill them deeper, you can kind of look at this plan and say, could something like that fit in there? And the applicant would have to realize this could create a problem where they'd have to maybe move walls if they ever had to work on the well.
Or re-drill in a completely different spot that's compliant.
That's correct.
Right.
Service would be difficult. Yeah.
That might be a risk that applicant chooses to take on.
Yeah. Do we know anything about the well construction beyond just its location, like the depth, etc.?
I can get that. I did have the well inspected before we bought the house. If I remember right, it was on the order of 200 feet, but I don't really remember that well. But I can get you that information.
And I believe this well, from what I heard, is inside a well, not apron, but a well It's just like a well within a well, like the large cylinders that they used to put them in. And so it's under the ground a little bit. Is that correct?
From what I can tell, yeah, there's a manhole cover. When you take the manhole cover off, there was something in the middle that they pulled out. But the manhole
Yes.
cover is like feet wide, and then there's something in the middle there, yeah.
Very, very common, but we don't allow that any longer. And the reason for it is water can seep in there, as well as you can get vermin and snakes and all that too in those casings with the manhole covers. So in today's standards, and I would suggest maybe at this point you consider it so the work's done before this other work is done, is that the well casing be brought to grade up 18 inches above grade as we require with the well apron. And that way it's visible, it can be serviced, and it wouldn't be difficult. It would be very difficult to try to do that after the fact of this. So I would suggest that if the board's going to consider a waiver, that you consider that as well.
I like that idea, Mark. I think just sort of minimizing the potential for any kind of, you know, entrainment, leaching, anything that can be done to minimize that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, and so the main thing that we need to think about right now is that there's an existing nonconformance, and we need to look at either, and what is that existing distance, and then do we view any new nonconformance that, as long as it's equal to or greater than that, then is this really not anything that needs any kind of variance or other thing? It's a funny thing where we don't really get variances for this, but would we count it as just being part of the current grandfathered non-conformance?
Right. I mean, I think for existing grandfathering, you can't exacerbate or make it closer than what it already is. So I would say that's kind of just like the typical performance standard I think we would need to adhere to. So you can't, whatever you do, you can't decrease even further the distance to your well. I think.
So I would be comfortable with that. The one part that I've been thinking about too is whether this window well should count as a projection from the house. And I'm inclined not to look at that, because I think it gets to be, as one of my clients would always say, it gets too cute with playing with the regulations. It's very small. I don't know that it qualifies as the other kinds of projections I would think of coming off of a house.
Well, it's not on the foundation, correct? So it's a projection above grade, or is that not correct?
It's above and below grade.
Oh, it is above and below grade.
It's screwed onto the foundation there.
Oh, it is. I don't know, Daryl, that gets funkier. Like I was thinking, you know, if it was sort of a window well that jutted out from an exterior wall, but wasn't necessarily at ground surface, I think that's really easy. I wouldn't be concerned with that. But when it's at grade, are we going to say it's a de minimis size? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, because I'm thinking people could start looking at their electrical meter on the outside, or a large, I don't know, bird feeder attached to the house. Or it just starts to get onto, I think, tricky ground. But so if we look at this and assume there's something like, it's a 4-inch pipe, so we take 2 inches off, maybe you get down to 5 feet, 4.5 roughly. You know, Seth and I talked a little bit on whether, if that distance could be maintained here, it wouldn't even have to run all the way out. It would just need to have that 5 inches roughly setback from the well to here. So it might mean a slight trimming, and then it could go back out. But
Seth, if we sort of propose something on that scale, would that meet your needs?
Yeah, I would be willing to, adjust that wall. I just need to know I'd be willing to adjust it within, you know, a few inches.
But if we asked you to match it to kind of say, can that be kind of the same distance as the current, I guess is the 5 foot 6.5 inch. So we sort of want it to be
whatever that actually is, because that was to the center of the well versus being.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yes.
Yeah, so when, just let me get the measurement again. Maybe Mark can chime in. When you say to the edge of the well casing in this type of well, am I measuring, you know, or would I have measured to the edge of the manhole cover? Or would it be to the inside?
There's a casing that comes out of the, well, in the ground at this point. The outside of that casing would be the point where your well starts to the
outside
distance of the projection.
Yes, of
So
just
that
for
inner
the
casing,
well.
yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for clarifying that. So yeah, if we have that measurement and I can try to match that, that is acceptable to me. Are we so are we deciding that the window well is then not a projection, or that is not the closest point?
I think we're ambivalent about the window well. So if we can talk you into the 5 inches, that makes it much easier. Because I think to Daryl's point, it's sort of like, I think for me, the window well feels more gray about sort of when is it truly a projection. I'm not totally sold it's not, but I'm also not totally sold it is. And it feels much easier if we can have something less ambiguous as our line in the sand, as long as it meets your needs.
Okay, yeah, I think I will remeasure that, and you know, it will bring my 4-inch gap down a little bit, so that is probably fine.
If I may, you don't have any other distance issues like to the septic system, do you?
No, the septic
tank?
is on the front of the house.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure we're doing all this, and I'm saying, well, wait a minute, we got to make sure the septic tank's not an issue of the system. Thank you.
Yeah,
Right,
and the other,
I think, oh, go ahead.
Just one thing that I do want to do is, if you, I don't know if any of the other pictures show the roof line, but I do want the roof to go further than the wall so that it attaches to the other part of the other part of the house, so that there's not like a little gap in between that would collect things. And also it will help bring the rainwater down the new roof farther away from the well, farther away from the house. And if I read the regulation correctly, the projections are limited to up to 5 feet. And I just wanted to verify that. So I could go in a little bit with my projection above 5 feet. So I would still want that to see the white part of the second floor. I would still want the roof to touch that on the side. So if you move your arrow over, just to like the
Oh, so, I see. So maybe about which way?
Yeah, so if you just slide your cursor straight up, and so the edge of that is where I want the roof. I want the roof to attach to that piece of the house so that there's not a little gap.
Oh, I see.
In between there, but that'll be much above 5 feet. So I think I just wanted to verify that that's true.
Mark, are you able to answer that?
I really can't tell what it would look like, but if it's a roof line, it's now we're going into a lateral distance versus right from the house itself. But is this roof line that's already overlapping the yard? What's it coming out about 2 feet from that triple window?
No, that looks smaller than 2 feet. It looks pretty small over here, but.
The new roof is not going to be there. It'll be coming from the peak of the mudroom. Yeah, so the new roof is going to start there, and it will come down, so it'll be above where the roof.
Will it come all the way out to wherever?
Yeah. It might be better if you looked in the plan document.
Well, maybe if you draw some dotted lines on the roof line on that plan you showed, you know, just
Well, I
show-
guess the question is it, so we've been looking at the walls. Is it, and there's the window well. The question is, should we have been looking at what the roof distance is now versus the walls?
I mean, isn't the concern the proximity of the exterior wall? Like, so to me, a window well, that's like almost a decorative feature. It's versus being part of the, you know, structural component of the building. I don't know. I mean, Mark, it wasn't that really kind of the concept about why the setback was put about structural integrity versus sort of, you know, movable, almost not decorative, but less structural features.
I wish I could answer that, Lucy. I wasn't available when they created the regulation, so I really don't know what to say on that.
I mean, I would think if we think of it from the standpoint of being able to get equipment in to do something with the well, this could be moved. Now the question becomes, should everything be measured from whatever the roof overhang is? Yes or no? I don't have a really strong feeling on that, because I think maybe any added inches here, then you just are reducing the or you're changing the distance, and then
I mean, usually we use like the footprint of the structural components of a building, like for a lot of other things we do. So to me, that seems logical. I just from a logic standpoint, I would say that the exterior wall of the building makes the most sense to use as a measurement.
Yeah, I like that.
I like that too. And I also think in this case, going back to Mark's earlier point, with this sort of cylinder design, having something that reduces the amount of kind of water that's directed to that area probably also reduces the risk of entrainment. But I think Lisa's point of everything else we do is to the profile of the building, and that's a reasonable standard to apply here. It makes a ton of sense to me.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I think that kind of answers your roof line question, and that we're going to stay down here with the walls.
Okay.
Is that okay, Seth?
Yeah. And whoever just spoke last, that's exactly my concern, why I want the roof to be able to collect the water and not spill it right down in that hole. Because improving the well is absolutely part of the plan, because this floods right now. It's just waiting to get contaminated.
Yeah. No, and that also helps us with just protecting the well in general. And yes, if you need to do any work on this well, it might get tough to get equipment in, but it would already be somewhat tough to get equipment in. So.
Well, could I ask just a general question? When we moved in, it's not a high yield well. The folks that inspected it said we should, have it re-drilled or something. It's probably, I don't think it's original to the house, but it's pretty close. So probably somewhere in the 50s. Should I expect to be re-drilling this? Would you expect that I would re-drill this within like the next 10 years?
It depends if I can help here on your water use. If you're irrigating your yard, that does put a lot of burden on the well. And the other question that would come into play is, as you noted, if it's getting saturated, that could be causing for debris to be getting into your well and could clog it as well. So there's a lot of factors that go into it, how much use there is, and especially if you're drawing it down too often. Say if in the summer you're watering your grass, you may be clogging up your fissures that way. So not intentional, but it can happen. So some people draw their wells down so low that they draw sand out of the lower fissures. So and that does clog it up. So it's appropriate use, protecting it from contamination are the two key things. I don't recommend irrigating yards, grass, and so forth.
And I'll note that there are lots of wells in town that are older than that and haven't been re-drilled. Now, what we have been seeing in some parts of town is whether it's impacts from several years of drought or from additional development, that some people have been deepening their wells or replacing their wells, but we can't be positive what that's related to.
Okay, good. I'm just kind of trying to weigh, you know, if I make this more difficult to service, is it likely I'm just going to be drilling a new one anyway, which would be in a different location, obviously.
Right. I mean, you might be able to have someone do some marginal work just to check on it, or I don't know how long you've lived there, but if you haven't had too much trouble over the last, how many years of the drought, Mark? Like 3 years? This
I'd
year's
say
been a
about
little
that.
better, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's been fine, except when I leave the, you know, when I'm the gardening watering on too long, it goes dry.
okay, and does it revive, come back within
Yeah,
a
within 15,
reasonable
20
amount of
minutes.
time?
Well, what I would suggest is if the board's going to require you to bring the casing up to 18 inches above grade and a well apron around it, that can be made out of earth. It goes 2 feet out. You build it up 3 inches from the grade on the outside end of the radius, and grass seed, basically. It keeps water from going directly into the casing. But if they require you to do that, you may want to have a well company evaluate your well at the same time, because if you're going to do that work and you know the well's not performing as good as it could, it may be a decision you would need to make at that time based on what the well driller tells you.
Okay, thanks for that. It is something that weighs on me every time it rains heavy. I see that pool up there.
Okay.
So then,
yeah.
for as far as measurements, so if we go with what we've kind of discussed, for the measurements, do you is a tape measure sufficient? Do you need an engineer to sign off on it?
So Mark, could you define what the, or Ellen, the
Sure. Typically,
requirements for that?
Yeah, on a well plan, Dara, typically in a well plan, we'll either have the well driller, if they're willing to do it. Sometimes they're not. They lately are getting a little bit concerned about liability if they were wrong. So, or an engineer, or sometimes a Title V inspector. Most of the times we see well plans coming in with changes or whatever with an engineer stamp on it is typically what we see, or a registered sanitarian.
But this isn't really a well plan. This is a building application showing where the well is. So would that apply?
It is, but it's also requesting a waiver from our regulations. So it's in the middle of those two areas, I would say. It's a building application, but can't be approved without a waiver from the Board of Health regulations.
I guess I'm not positive it's a waiver versus a confirmation of an existing non-conformance.
Well, it would be non-conforming without any addition going up. But if he's putting up an addition, that's new construction, that would interfere with the well. And typically we would require them to ask for a waiver if it's going to be too close.
Okay, that's where I was wondering if it would just be a confirmation of no further exacerbation of nonconformity. Does anyone else have a view on that? I don't know. Have we ever had anything like this before?
Not on my time, but what I would say is I do think it's sort of, if there's a question about it, it seems like it's reasonable for us to vote on it. Although for me, it doesn't feel like the property's any less in compliance with what we've proposed. It seems like we're targeting to be exactly equally non-compliant. And so for me, it sort of feels like it's not less so, but I'm also happy to say, let's, sort of vote to allay any question about it.
I would just add too, it's a slippery slope because I know we're dealing with the well regulations. But we could have a scenario with the septic regulations and be challenged that, well, we allowed it in this case, why not my case? It's a slippery slope, I think, if you don't look at it as a waiver request, in my view.
I have a problem though, because how can you grant a waiver to something that doesn't have a well application? I mean, I have nothing to, there's no.
Yeah, it would be a waiver to the building application. They can't get the building application. We've had these before where you can't go too close to the septic tank or something like that with, and it's a building application, but this would be based on a building application.
I don't think it's ever been done before.
Have we ever had a hearing on a building application though?
Typically, if you needed a waiver, say from, say, 5 feet to a septic tank versus 10, something like that.
But then there would be a septic application, not a building application.
Well, you could do one or the other, I guess, but building applications are going to present distance issues. That's why we haven't signed a negative impact form. When we presented with that, that's when the board has to make a decision. And it's going to be different. It's going to be a request to waive from the regulation in most cases, on distances in most cases.
Is there any way we could research to see how we've done that in the past, just so we know what?
Yeah, we could. Wells, we haven't seen, this is unique, I will say that, but for septic, I believe we've seen previous building requests where they either moved the septic tank or they were going to come in and ask for a waiver because the distance was too close to a septic tank.
I think it's the septic tank would have been moved. So there's no waiver. So this is totally.
In most, Ellen, you are right. In most cases, instead of the waiver, the board asks that they just move the septic tank, but so.
I think it's because they can't give a waiver to something that's not a septic application.
That I'm not for sure of.
So if it's already grandfathered because it's an existing condition and they don't exacerbate it by moving anything closer than what it already is, do we need to do anything?
Yeah, other than you could make a requirement for the like what Mark had suggested. Bringing it 18 inches above grade.
Okay, so like the apron, etc. Okay. But I mean, I don't think we're not approving that they're not conforming because it's a grandfathered condition. So I don't think we need to vote on that aspect.
I would say you don't need to move on the existing conditions, but if someone's changing their foundation, I think that's a new request. I see it, as is, it's fine. They don't need to ask for waivers. But if the applicant's asking to move a foundation or closer to, say, a well or septic tank or a leaching field, that does need to be addressed by the board in some way, because they don't need to do that addition, but if they wish to, then we need to address it under our regulations.
I do agree with Mark.
All right, I think we would need to either note that there will be a comparable nonconformity resulting, and to compensate for that, I'm not saying this has to be the way, I'm saying it's one way, and to compensate for that would be improvements to the well by extending to the 18 inches above grade and having the apron. Or this other concept of saying, well, we've got one nonconformity, but now there's a whole separate wall that we want to give a variance to. To me, that feels much more difficult, I guess, just procedurally. And
I think, as much as I hate to say it, I think normally you would just require the well to be replaced somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is true. That's why when you asked Darrow if we had other examples, I think that's what we normally have them do, is just move if they wish to do the addition, just move the septic tank. And that's the only ones I can think of right now, septic tanks.
Oh, no, I agree with that. It's just that here, right, there's a non-conformity. So I guess that's a question for the rest of the board. Are we comfortable with another non-conformity? I guess I was feeling comfortable with it, but
I feel comfortable with it just because I think, again, I think this is the piece where the risk sits with the homeowner primarily. And so I think that, making sure that Seth understands it in those pieces. To me, whether you have one projection of the house or had 3 projections of the house, you sort of still have a house that has violated that. And that for me, the difference of having an additional wall that is no more in violation than the existing structure doesn't make me uncomfortable. I suspect that ZBA or others have many more pieces of like how to deal with non-conformingness and when is something the same. It feels excessive to require movement of a well to end up in a situation that theoretically should pose no more risk to the well than current state. I would say I would be enthusiastic, given the flooding that Seth describes, about having it above grade just as an additional strategy to protect.
Yeah.
And so Seth, I guess that's my other check-in with you. If that were a requirement, would that be comfortable to you, or does that, like, what are your reactions to that?
Yeah, the requirement to bring it above grade and with the apron is absolutely something that I'm happy to do. I'm enthusiastic to do. And I think in my thought about the entire project is that by having the roof there, one of the problems is that a lot of rainwater collects in this area. So by putting the roof there, it would be able to move the rainwater away from this area. So it'd be even better for the well in that way too.
And downspouts maybe, or gutters that could divert flow, right, from the roof, even further.
Yep.
Well, so I think that makes a non-conforming existing condition, and you're improving existing conditions. So that seems doable.
That is my goal.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that. I think it goes back to the similar thing of the other one of how many specific circumstances can we cite so that this doesn't turn into something that everybody does. I just don't think that many people have it'll emerge afterwards how many people have this situation, just like we seem to have more cesspools in town than I had imagined we might, but is to define it closely as to why.
But I also feel like if we had 100 people that were in a situation, like if I just pause and say, let's say there are 100 people in a position like Seth, to me, it feels like we have a net improvement in safety to groundwater, both for the homeowner and whatever else that feeds through cracks and fissures. And so I feel okay with it, even if this were the first of many such approaches that had that net effect.
Yeah. And I think the other piece, a bit related to something Mark said, is that we're explicit that it's because it's a well versus septic, because there are more issues, I think, around septic placement and risks of having waste underground near a home or something else. And we could go into that some other time if you want, but
100% agree. I think this is a well decision that's specific to well.
Yeah. Okay, so for the comfort of the homeowner, well, often we do these by giving a sense of the board. Do we feel we need to vote on something, have a motion and vote, or Ellen, what have we done when we've done a sense of the board, when people have come in before they submit all the formal final materials?
Well, yes, because I typically just will say, the board agreed, but because it's remote, you have to take a roll call vote, so.
Yeah, okay. All right, would someone like to propose a motion, or I can, but if anyone else would like the fun.
I really specialize in seconding.
Okay, so do we have a motion to indicate do we want to say inclination, willingness, or be more forceful, will?
I can take a stab at it, Daryl.
Yeah, do that. See, I knew I could encourage you.
One thing you can count is that Matt Vitale will interrupt somebody and express his own opinion. It's well established. So what I would say is, do I have a motion to express support for the principle that improvement of an existing non-conforming well location without further incursion from a distance from closest point to well, that includes improvements to the existing well, in this instance, raised wellhead and apron to reduce the risk of incursion, are consistent with the guiding, I mean, is it guiding principle? I don't know. I sort of tapered out there, but are consistent with interpretation of the existing regulations such that such a project would be generally considered supportively. Is that too much, Helen? Because Matt,
yeah, it is.
Yeah, I lost you, Matt. I mean, I think what we're
short. You maybe take a stab.
Sure. So I think I would move that the board is in support of a project that would result in sort of a non-conforming condition that is not worse than an existing non-conforming condition, and that involves overall improvement to the safety of the well.
Yeah.
Good. I like that.
What about the requirements? Are you going to put in that, you know, you need a well plan done by either a well driller or an engineer and require the casing brought 18 inches above and the well apron? Are you going to, is that in the motion?
I don't think that doesn't need to be done by a driller. Can we just specify what the?
I would say just
a well driller or an engineer.
Or I don't think we need to specify who does it, just that, you know, it shall be extended 18 inches above grade to inhibit flow into the well or something. The well.
Maybe we could just say that the new foundation shall not be any closer to the well than the existing foundation.
That's part one, and that part two is
that the existing well will be raised above grade.
The casing shall be.
Casing, yeah.
And there shall be an apron, and that shall be completed prior to the construction of the addition.
And you can put, if you want, per our regulations, because the casing definition is 18 inches and the well apron's defined as well within our well regulations. So you can per our regulations.
And then in terms of the plan, because we will need, you know, an accurate plan with measurements, can an architect also do that? Since this is not the siting of the well, but this is distant.
I think that's appropriate, Daryl, because it's a building application. I don't see a problem with that.
Okay.
So moved.
I'll second that. Okay, Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay.
Good luck, Seth.
Yeah.
Okay, just for my clarity, now my next steps are, I have, will you guys write something that I can give to the building department? Or do I go out and do the well improvements and then come back to you?
I think the first step is have your architect do precise measurements and drawings that show where things will be in those setbacks from the well, so that we can confirm the nonconformity, and then you'd need to pay if this is then back into the realm not of applying for a variance, but of having the building application reviewed, then it will be another $50, I believe. Ellen can confirm that.
Will this be a well plan then that comes in for this work on the well? Is this a well considered like a well repair?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah.
I don't see it that way. I see it as just a building application, but that the work be done before the building application can be approved. You know, and the architect will show the well. The work is not really drilling or looking for an accurate location because they're drilling a new well or an existing well. So I would keep it just to the building application side of it, but the key thing here is allowing Seth to know when we can trigger the approval of the building application on our end.
Yeah.
And I would suggest, as we do with even these in-law apartments, we're seeing accessory units, that we approve it after the work had been done, such as a Title V inspection. For the other cases, in this case, it would be the 18 inches above grade for the casing and the well apron per our regulations, is my suggestion.
Oh, okay. So do that even before, and then I guess from whatever that, maybe that's good, because then you'll have the casing there to measure to get those precisely. Does that make sense then, Seth?
Yep, so we're saying upgrade the well, get updated drawings from the architect with measurements with setbacks, and then write to the board again for a approval of the building application. And on the updating the well, is that something I need to come back to you to get a permit for? Or is that something I can just do?
That would be something that is really, we've never, it's usually part of when they re-drill wells or drill a new well. But in this case, as long as a well driller does it, you want to have someone that knows what they're doing, because when they weld that casing, the new casing to the old casing, they need to know what they're doing, and that's where your well drillers come into place.
Yeah.
And do we have a list of approved
Yeah.
drillers? Okay.
They're not approved, but we have a list of well drillers.
Who's certified, because we did that here, but we did have somebody who was a well specialist. We raised our casing when we were redoing our home.
Yeah. Yeah, I know my neighbor had this done. His house is similar to mine, except his well's not so close, but it had the manhole cover and he had it. So I have a contact from him also.
Oh, okay, good.
Okay, so that's my marching orders. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I hope you're not here too late.
I think we're just about done. Sorry you had to wait so long.
No, I'm happy. I'm happy to move forward with this.
Okay, that's the spirit.
All right, bye.
All right. Okay. Let's see. I think what we have left is COVID-19 update. Is that it?
And then your other business, you have update on artificial turf fields.
Oh, geez.
Wait, why do we need to do that? Because it got voted down. So can we table that, please?
Okay, I'll just mention that I'm sure this issue is going to come up again and we should talk about it at some point. There was a great deal of misinformation there at the meeting. But...
At the meeting and on Nextdoor, because people contended that we voted it against it, which we did not. So, I mean, there was a lot of misinformation on every side in that whole thing. So, but it's done. So
I don't think forever, but anyway, we'll circle back to that. On Coolidge Crossing, people should know, if you didn't get a chance to read it, just that the project proponent there for the apartment units was agreeable to the things that the Board of Health recommended in terms of not waiving certain parts of our regulations, because they had asked for a very blanket waive everything kind of a thing, and there were a few things that should not have been. And then on the other one, there's still many complexities, and I don't know if there was information from a butter to, or a nearby neighbor to 59 North Main, which had also gone through the 40B ZBA process. And we had recommended extended pump tests for there. Mark, I think it got down to maybe a 2-day test of simultaneous pumping or 1 day. I can't
I'm
recall.
not for sure where they went with that, Daryl. I'm not for sure what they were planning, but I know on the other site next to 59 North Main Street, it was a 2-day process. And I believe over, because I was involved with the wells for the those homes that were built next to
Right.
Woodhaven, and that was he had to stay overnight there, and I believe that was a 3-day process. So it's 2 to 3 days, I believe.
Okay, so what came out though is that one of the neighbors to 59 North Main
I
has
just
had,
want I just want to make sure, is this, I'm trying to figure out which agenda item this connects to. Is this the 41 North Main piece? Or is this?
yes,
Okay, perfect. So it's the pump testing as part of the,
right. Next step, because it appears that the 2-day, if I feel it was 2 days, I didn't get a chance to check what it was at 59 North Main, but someone ended up having to do an awful lot of drilling to get water shortly after that project went in. And so it argues for whether there should be more push on a longer pump test, but that will be addressed with ZBA and a number of others.
and I would say, I think, you know, again, I think in the context of any of the 40Bs in that downtown area, it just feels like we've had so many wells in that area that have had performance issues that whatever we can do for a real world use case certainly is appealing, you know,
Yes.
especially for learning that from the 59 North Main experience. Because I just feel like that's a segment of town. I don't have the statistics, but it certainly feels the most represented in areas where we've needed failed well replacement, especially in the periods where we were dry, and accepting the really shallow dug wells that have failed in other parts of town.
Right, and pump tests used to be 6 months for bedrock, large bedrock wells. I mean, 59 North Main wasn't super large. And then it's been reduced and reduced over time. A week at least is more common. So anyway, that might come up. And also one of the abutters pulled out a mass housing comment letter of some sort from 2020 that talked about how the water issues should be resolved before going much further with the project. So kind of those two things taken together, there might be some push on that coming up, but they're trying to close the hearings on the 27th of this month. So that's the short version of that.
And I think we provided that guidance to ZBA before.
Yes, and I think, and I provided the information received to Nobis.
Perfect.
Because they're trying to evaluate that sort of thing. So
Thanks,
good.
Carol.
Okay. All right, COVID update. Back to the sports.
I think we can do sports. One, I would just say it's so frustrating for so much of this because it was there's just so much artificial chaos from the very short notice. I think the state's done an amazing job on so many elements, but especially as it relates to the youth sports, there are so many changes in short order and for a short period of time. I wish they'd handled it differently. I think the issue that came up, or at least that came up to me, was for Dover. So basically, a parent had reached out to me in the context of Dover and Sherborn having different recommendations. I think one of the conversations that had come up also in the health and hygiene piece as we worked on kind of messaging in the school and thinking about the school piece is just, you know, for the kids, kind of how complicated it is if we have different rules in different places, like this is the rule here and this is the rule there, and that being confusing. And so a parent had kind of raised the question to say, you know, for Dover it says this, for Sherborn it says that. I had followed up with Ellen, who I think was on the DPH call and also is working to make sense of regulations I think are contradictory. Like in one place it says one thing, in another place it says another thing. In both places there's some ambiguity. So the mask order describes outdoor being permitted to be unmasked if distancing can be maintained between family groups, but defers to sector-specific guidance for, sort of for primacy if there's separate sector-specific guidance. In the EEA guidance, which is what's actionable for youth sports, they describe that young athletes do not need to be masked so long as they're outdoors. And I think there are two parts that are sort of confusing. Sorry, my computer just went. I closed the wrong window. But basically, there's language for the for adult participants or for sports participants 19 age of or older and their restrictions, and then there's kind of conflicting language about spectators. And so the interpretation of mass youth soccer was that spectators are permitted so long as social distancing is maintained between family groups, which looks like it was also Dover's interpretation. I think for us, when we looked at the EEA regulation, there's a last sentence that introduces some ambiguity that I think we're hoping to talk about. But maybe Ellen, can you expand on that? I'm like trying to find the thing and not sufficiently coherent because it's 10:30.
Oh, let's see.
So I can comment on it too, Ellen, while you look, unless you're ready.
Yeah.
Basically, the mask guidance for spectators and participants is very vaguely worded, and then it says everyone must wear a mask except, and then it goes to list like exceptions for just about everyone. And then at the end, it says spectators should follow the rules above. So it's very difficult to understand if that means they should follow the rules to wear a mask or they should follow the rules under the exceptions.
I just think that we need to use some like scientific logic here. So if it's okay for youth and also adults to engage in various sports without masks, why would there be a higher, more restrictive standard for bystanders who are not breathing heavily and in physical contact?
I agree completely. I think that was the intent, and I think we actually saw some draft language that didn't get incorporated that made it more explicit. So I do think that the spectators should not have to wear masks. I just think it's obvious, it's clear where the confusion could come in because it's just not well written.
So can we just make what we think is appropriate guidance?
I think that's fine.
And then the other thing I would add, because I think all of this comes down to the fact that this was rushed by the state, and so some of the language is sloppy, and then that creates, I think, a natural confusion. So I'm looking right now at required safety protocol section 5 under social distancing on page 7. They have a specific carve out for while indoors, visitors, spectators, volunteers, and staff must wear facial coverings, where I think if we said, I think in that spot, their carve out was intentional, which I think also supports the idea that I think in outdoors, it should follow the general guidance. I don't think the intent of the regulation is to say that as a spectator at an outdoor sport, it's an independently different risk profile than other not inherently close contact outdoor activities. And so I think the intent of the reg is consistent with what Mass Youth Soccer said, which is that we need to have people space between family groups for this 12-day period, 10-day period, because probably nobody's doing it tonight. And I think that seems consistent, although I think the language is contradictory. I think we've sought more guidance from the state, and so if they tell us something different, I think we'd have to go back on that. But otherwise, I would favor sticking with the general guidance given the ambiguity in the EEA document, although I think a lot of that just comes from the state document being lousy.
Right. I mean, and that's happened before, Matt. I mean, unfortunately, at the state level, there's a lot of non-scientists and physicians writing, these quote guidance documents, and they're not as attentive to specifics and language as we would like to see. But I think it also makes sense to look at CDC and research on a worldwide basis, vis-a-vis the negligible transmission opportunity in most circumstances in an outdoor setting, period. So I think, indoors is a different environment than outdoors. And I think the scientific data support that we should not be requiring, spectators outside to be wearing masks.
And I would echo that. I would say, I think like kind of wearing the doctor hat and just thinking about that risk, what I would say is, I think for the pattern of use we describe in terms of space, social groups, with particularly kind of, I think that for the youth sports, we have a better sense of who is present and how they're participating as compared to, say, a block party or something else, that I think that the risk profile of this as a spectator is probably lower, as low risk as general outdoor activities, or perhaps lower given the knowledge about who's a member of this group and who's attending is more than we have in other outdoor settings. So I think from a risk standpoint, it is equal risk to the other outdoor scenarios we're talking about.
I'd say that's a good segue into indoor settings and other settings. So there are three main things I want to bring up. I don't know that we have to resolve it tonight, but one is Zoom meetings, and the MAHB, Massachusetts Association of Health Boards, is submitting comments already to see if meetings by Zoom could be extended. I think for the comfort of people who attend and the idea of us being in an indoor space for 4 hours with groups of people, the people could come and go, we can't, or other boards and committees can't come and go from those meetings.
I would also say, I think I'm wildly enthusiastic about it. I think we also have members of our community who, even if vaccinated, may not have an effective vaccine because they've got an organ transplant or on chemo. And
Yep,
so
exactly.
that their ability to participate in civic activities is preserved, I think is important. So I'm enthusiastic to the degree we're permitted. I think the Zoom meetings have been really positive for letting people participate.
Yeah, so I was thinking of writing, I don't know if I'll get to it, if anyone else wants to, just to either support the MAHB's request or send in a separate plea for that to the Department of Public Health. So there's that topic. Then there's Woodhaven and what we might want to recommend takes place over there, how the community room is used. What do we think about guidance for outdoor gatherings, that sort of thing? And then the last would be town departments and town hall in particular, because the fire department and DPW have kind of long worked out how they keep functioning during this time. But town hall and what would be our guidance?
So for town hall,
because again, it's indoor space. So for me, indoors is just entirely different.
although I guess I don't disagree with that. I think for me, I'd kind of put Woodhaven in one bucket because that's a place where I think we can give guidance, but it's not the same as like what can people do in terms of accessing town government.
Yeah.
And so for town hall, it feels tricky because I think if the state has removed, kind of their restrictions on May 29th and the state of emergency is over on June 15th, it feels hard to restrict access to town hall in terms of the community. I think that just as we found that Zoom has been really successful, I think as an employer, we would be unwise. Like remote work activity has been really positive. I think it will continue to be an important source of comfort for members of our staff who may have either worry about this or found that this is a not more expensive way that allows them to kind of do what they need to do effectively. So I hope as a town we'll continue to incorporate remote work into how we use our physical plan and how we allow people to space and do their jobs. But it feels harder to say that we won't be open or we won't do things if we're in a place where the state has said, it's sort of business as usual. It's hard to have government be one of the places that's not.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, I could believe it'll be a mix. And they've also acknowledged that there are certain settings, indoor settings, that they expect precautionary measures to continue, being schools, healthcare facilities,
Yeah.
long-term care, and businesses are also encouraged to establish their own procedures around this. So, but that's something, it seems a little late. I don't know if I'm ready to debate all of that, but I see we have some folks connected with Woodhaven and with Town Hall. If there are any comments people want to share now. Maybe not. So do we want to keep going on this, or do we want to?
Well, I know I will be getting questions. Do people still need to wear masks in town hall after the 29th?
I mean, I think we need to see what the guidance is after the 29th.
There isn't going to be any.
Yeah, so I mean, I think if there's no guidance from the state, it feels hard to require it, right? I mean,
I agree, Matt, and I'm very concerned about setting a precedent that deviates from, you know, CDC and Mass DPH guidance, because then, you know, I think people can elect to do their own personal, you know, if you want to wear a mask, I mean, no one's going to dissuade you as an employee or a person, but I think in terms of setting forth, you know, rigid requirements and prohibitions, I get concerned if we're going beyond what the rest of the state, you know, is recommending from the DPH perspective and what the CDC is requiring. I think that's a tenuous place to go.
but I do think like remote work strategies are an important part of this, just to debulk if there are ways that we can get the work done as we have for the last year plus and still deliver services to the community in ways that are comfortable for the folks who work with us. That feels like a good strategy, particularly in as much as it doesn't compromise public access.
Right, that's what I was thinking of too, is to support people for whom in an indoor space when everyone else isn't masked, even if they are, might not be comfortable for them or safe for whatever their condition might be.
So I think if it's not safe, that's sort of a separate consideration and an accommodation through the workplace and like their specific piece. But I think that like it's going to be traumatic for many of us to come off. And I think that's a thing that I've heard from the parents of some kids is like, I thought they were going to be so happy and relieved. And they're just, the kids have really internalized the message of like masks are what keep us safe. And so now there's this thing that's worry provoking for them. And that's really natural. Like I feel the same worry. And so I think that as an employer, like we really need to make it so we're supporting our staff and that we're taking the lessons we learned from the pandemic about how we can think creatively and deliver services effectively and as much as possible, particularly in this early return to normalcy phase, continue to adopt those. I think that where I'd feel differently is if we had features that made us an above average risk. So we thought that the risk profile of the state was lower risk than our own. I think that's a place that I'd be enthusiastic for added restrictions, but our observed data has been, in general, Sherborn has been lower risk than the state as a whole. So it feels particularly difficult to invoke new pieces there. And for me, this is restricted to town hall. I think Woodhaven is a specific scenario related to that I think is kind of its own set of choices.
I guess I also think about certainly the under 12 population too in all of this. I feel like they've done their share all along, and is it also time for us to try to make sure that they get a chance to? But they're not going to be hanging out in town hall as much, et cetera. But
Yeah, I think that goes under the school stuff that we
I
can
think
articulate at a different time.
And I think the guidance from the state will still be that they should wear a mask if they're unvaccinated.
Yeah.
That's what I saw. For indoors at school, but not for recess and
Well,
not.
just in general, I think under 12 is not vaccinated. So in general, the guidance is going to continue to be that they should be wearing a mask. It's not going to be a mandate, but it's going to be advised.
And is the data still pointing to, I know there's always been the question of just how much vaccinated people can still contribute to spreading
I think
the
it's
virus.
I think it's better. I think so. I think the two things, like mostly COVID has been like an unmitigated dumpster fire of badness. I think that in the context of vaccines, the vaccine performance has generally done better than we might have reasonably hoped. I think that we know that sort of if the Yankees taught us anything, it's this isn't perfect and you can still be infected. I think what we've observed is that the likelihood of of unvaccinated close contacts of vaccinated people is meaningfully lower than the close contacts of unvaccinated people. So I think at this point we can conclude that vaccination provides some protection from becoming infected and transmitting it. And we know that the rate of symptomatic infection is markedly reduced. We certainly also know that there's asymptomatic infection that is still present in the vaccinated folks, but we believe that the risk of transmission from an asymptomatic as opposed to a pre-symptomatic person is also measurably lower. So I think that the sort of risk of like kind of people bringing stuff in and transmitting it, particularly as community incidence gets very low, is pretty modest. I still think that being cognizant of like, we shouldn't say like we had a big town hall party, everybody's so excited to be back that we then had a big brunch where everybody who works in town goes into the break room upstairs and is elbow to elbow. Like that still isn't a great choice now, even if it's not a forbidden one. So I think we still need to exercise common sense. But I think the risk of transmitting as a vaccinated person is pretty low.
Right, and that's what I've seen, but I also heard that there was, or read somewhere that there's a study tracing college students, I guess, who were vaccinated and with follow-up testing, periodic testing and that sort of thing, just to see what might be spreading among the vaccinated population. So
it's definitely not zero. I mean, I think we know that the vaccine is better at preventing symptomatic infection than all infection. And so I think that it is definitely possible for vaccinated people to get it, to transmit it, and to never know they had it. I think the important piece I would add in addition to that is how likely that scenario is to happen is very dependent on how prevalent is COVID in the community. So I think one of the added layers of protection we have now is, we've got about 1/10 the incidence that we had at the peak of the second surge. And that really does matter in terms of just what's the likelihood of these different pieces lining up. And that will continue to decline in the weeks ahead.
And I think the other point to make is that we will never get to zero.
Yeah.
So.
And we don't for other diseases either. So, we have to gain some perspective, especially if you're, talking a vaccinated person, even if you get it, your chances of being asymptomatic are very high. You're not gonna, that's what all the studies show. It's very effective at preventing serious, disease and hospitalization. So in the light of that and the relatively low incidence of, transmission likelihood in vaccinated people, I just think we have to, have some logic here too. Everything has a risk. Nothing's a risk of zero. So I could get a really bad flu. I could get really bad tuberculosis too. So let's just not lose like complete perspective on it.
And I'll admit that, and I agree with all of that, absolutely how I think about it. But I also read a lot of international press about just the general repeat surges, variance, and what are we doing to
Right, but
avoid that? Because I'd like to see this stop as opposed to surge again, surge again, surge again.
but the
And if
US
it took a few more months of being precautionary to get rid of it, but you're right, I don't think Sherborn alone, Massachusetts alone, or even the United States alone is not going to stop that dynamic.
I would also say, I think super duper valid worries. I think that the variant, right now, there's no variant that's consistently demonstrating itself in this environment. And I think we also have other areas like Israel where there was very rapid early adoption, including with some of the variants that we've been concerned about. And we're still not seeing those come out, despite really still having large segments of the Israeli society where there is also resistance to vaccination. And with some of those same variants, I think we're still seeing very, very good performance. I think what we have to be ready to do is to say, this is like diabetes, this is a thing that's out there now. We're not done with COVID and then we can go back to normal. We're done for COVID right now. And there is certainly a chance that in 6 months or a year, there could be a different variant, the same way that you can get a different flu variant that gives you a very different syndrome and pattern of risk. I think that that's going to stay true, and our masking behaviors right now won't mitigate or change that. I think for us, what we need to do is to keep training the data, to keep paying for the public health nurse and investing in these resources so that if we do identify it, we can quickly respond to it and mitigate the risk. But I think that as daunting as it feels, in some ways I'm profoundly reassured about seeing the same trends in places like Texas or Alabama or Arkansas or Mississippi, where they've essentially decided like in March that COVID was over and have done all the things that we're considering with trepidation and haven't seen big spikes or bursts, which also makes me hopeful, especially with the very robust uptake of vaccine in Massachusetts, I think is really encouraging.
I think the other thing that should reassure us is that we have the tools in place if things reverse to quickly step backwards. Right. I think that's where we weren't a year ago, is that I think we're at a place where we move forward, we sort of get back to where we were. And if we see concerning signals, we can spin back around much faster than we could when all this started.
Okay. So I'll say one more thing and then Margot. So I want to push you on some of this because I have to say nothing would make me happier if I didn't have to spend so much time on this anymore. But, okay. Margot, take it away.
I just have a couple of questions with regards to Woodhaven, because we have an Elder Housing Committee meeting tomorrow and people are going to wonder, can we use the gazebo?
I think yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that pass a gut check for you, Ellen and Daryl?
Yeah.
Rebecca?
It's outdoors. I'm always happy about that. Hopefully people who want to wear a mask are comfortable enough around those who don't there to wear the mask. I hope that they don't feel the pressure not to wear them.
I have no problems wearing a mask.
Oh, good.
As a former OR nurse, I won't have a problem. Also, I don't think the community room, we're ready to even discuss that.
Yeah, it's still a difficult situation.
Okay. The third thing is interior usage in the hallways and the common areas in the buildings. Do people have to continue to wear masks?
I would recommend it through the 29th.
Thank you. Perfect. That's all I need to have.
Does that pass a gut check for others?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to stick. I think we have to stick with state guidance. I don't think this qualifies as a special call-out location.
Nope.
And so I think
we have been treating it specially, though.
But
in cooperation with.
I think it doesn't meet the state definition.
No, but we have not treated it as the state would have treated it all along. But that was in cooperation with the residents and with other groups in town, including the COVID work group. So we've always chosen to treat it.
Well, so I think that Matt's point as long as the site's comfortable, that seems reasonable. I probably wouldn't go earlier than that. I would go through the 29th. I think that if we say this is not quite a congregate living setting in terms of what the state defines, I think that if we said, what's the thing that makes it the safest? You know, masking probably makes it the safest. At the same time, it probably turns from a requirement to a strong recommendation. But I guess for me, it makes me feel more nervous than many of the other things we talk about, just because the intrinsic risk to the, like if we sort of had somebody where we're wrong about how safe elementary school is, the risk to that kiddo is a lot lower than the risk to their grandparent would be. And so I do think it makes sense to exercise an abundance of caution. I think it gets hard to extend that caution past when the state has lifted all of its restrictions to say, you know, we're sort of standing alone. I would want to look and say, what are other like type facilities doing, and to make sure we align with those. So if we've got kind of similar places that we can reach out to say, or the other COAs to say, how are you guys handling it in a similar setting? If we're in that neighborhood, it kind of helps pass the sniff test. I wouldn't want to be more risk-taking than other places in general.
Thank you all very much for your efforts this evening. I will pass this information on tomorrow.
Margot, how does that feel for the gut check for you? Do these seem on track or off track? Like, does this feel like it's in the right neighborhood?
I think it's in the right neighborhood. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I have enjoyed social isolation. It's been a real gift. And I probably will continue in that mode. There are people that have just thrown their masks away and they are sitting out together in the patio. And as far as they're concerned, it's a wrap. I think we'll just give them a gentle reminder that we have to continue with indoor masks in the common areas. The gazebo will be able to be used. And that's it. And no community room for the time being. I think everyone would very much like you to have the community room available to us on October 3rd, when the Patriots will be playing against Tom Brady.
Certainly seems like we should be unpacked by then, if not before.
Thank you. Thank
And
you
also,
all.
yeah, let us know whatever comes out of your meeting. And if you want input from the Board of Health or support for things that you want to do, let us know.
We know you're always a phone call away. Thank you very much.
And the other thing I would add, and I think there's nothing sadder than Zoom clapping, but just a huge thank you to Daryl and Ellen, who I know have done just an enormous amount of work on this and so many other topics for the town over the last year. Like, you guys have just done yeoman's work while also dealing with the real estate boom.
It's just been amazing. Thank you.
So just in terms of this, the kind of youth sports guidance, I would say my preference would be to align with general outdoor mask guidance, which is that so long as social distancing is maintained between family groups, that outdoor masks would not be required. Does that feel okay to people? And Ellen, if we get different guidance from the state, I'd want to go back on it, but you're the person who's been on all our calls. Does that kind of seem comfortable to you?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other concerns for the board?
No.
Perfect. Okay.
I do hope that the trend of doing things outdoors continues.
Oh, I hope so too. And I think, you know, again, part of what makes me also just so reassured is like I think Massachusetts like had a well-targeted but not speedy start, but I think has really done a good job about getting wide vaccine access. And I'm still really encouraged about how much ongoing vaccination we're still seeing here. It is just really encouraging. Awesome.
Okay. All right.
Is that a wrap?
I believe we can adjourn, if that's okay with everyone.
It's so okay.
All right.
All right.
Have a good night.
Good night, everyone. Bye.
Good night, everybody.